to come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I bought a dog that killed the calf, that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
Hello, and welcome to the dog days of summer. We've got an action-packed episode to get you through August, so tighten up your enthusiasm harness and get ready to listen and enjoy. Eddie Mueller is here. Eddie is an expert in film noir. If you like movies with private eyes, tough guys, and saucy dames, Eddie's your dude. Eddie is the host of TCM's Noir Alley, which is forever and always a celebration of all things noir. And he has a new book out entitled Dark City Dames, which examines the lives and careers of a group of actresses from the heyday of film noir. As you might expect, their true life stories are often far more intense and insane than the movies they made. Eddie is also the author of such books as Dark City, San Francisco Noir, The Art of Noir, the novels The Distance and Shadowboxer. Eddie is a fascinating guy. It was a great interview. I could have talked to him all day. Eddie Mueller, ladies and germs. Also, one of our favorite people, Katherine Cold Iron, our resident film critic, is back. Katherine also has a new book out entitled Out There in the Dark. It's part memoir, part film criticism. You could say it is memoir as film criticism, or film criticism as memoir. You decide. But I read it in one sitting. It's great, it's informative, it's honest, it's brave. It's a terrific piece of work. It's a great idea. I wish I'd had it. Out There in the Dark by Katherine Cold Iron. True Tales from Weirdsville takes a deep dive into the cult classic Gun Crazy, informed in large part by the book Gun Crazy and the Origin of American Outlaw Cinema by, you guessed it, Eddie Mueller. Gun Crazy is not only a terrific cult film, but it's an incredibly important one, kicking off, as it did, an entire subgenre in American movies, one that still thrives today. That is, the stories of sociopaths in love. Gun Crazy. If you can find two words that better describe this country, you let me know. As for me, the next couple of months, I am busier than a one-armed traffic cop with a skin rash. So get out your pens. Here we go. August 15, 16, and 17, I will be at GalaxyCon in San Jose, California. I will be signing and watching my good friend Dr. Z as he hosts Hanging with Dr. Z Live. That's at GalaxyCon in San Jose, August 15, 16, and 17. The good Dr. Z performs on Saturday, the 16th. On Friday and Saturday, August 22nd and 23rd, I will be performing at Zany's in Rosemont, Illinois. That's just me in human form completely, at Zany's in Rosemont, Illinois, just outside of Chicago a bit. On Wednesday, August 27th, at the American Cinematheque in beautiful Los Feliz, California, the jewel in the crown that is Vermont Avenue, formerly known as the Los Feliz 3, this very podcast joins American Cinematheque's The Best of the Fest as I personally introduce one of my favorite films on the big screen in glorious black and white. 1962's surreal horror masterpiece, Carnival of Souls. It is the only narrative film that Herc Harvey ever made, although he did make a ton of industrial films, including the cult classic Shake Hands with Danger. Carnival of Souls. Imagine Final Destination as an art house film made 40 years before Final Destination. It is the movie David Lynch would have made if he wasn't 16 years old at the time. It stars Candice Hilligoss, and it shows Wednesday night, August 27th at 7 p.m. On Tuesday, the 26th, my good friend Greg Proops is showing The Producers, so it's going to be a rad time down at the good old American Cinematheque. If you are in Southern California, do try to make it out, won't you? September 7th, in Los Angeles, Hanging with Dr. Z Live at Dynasty Typewriter. Join Dr. Z, Rusty, Carmine St. Pierre, and the whole gang as we welcome guests Andy Daly, Laurie Kilmartin, and Chris Estrada. 2 more that you should be aware of, but now we're getting close to next month's plugs. September 12th, 13th, and 14th. Dr. Z and I will be at GalaxyCon in Des Moines, Iowa. I've never been to Des Moines, Iowa, but my good friend Dave Higgins lives there, and I hope to see him. And you. And lastly, on October 2nd, in Los Angeles, on the stage at Largo, it is Plan 9 from Outer Space live. A Hollywood Halloween tradition continues. With myself, Patton Oswalt, Kimmy Robertson, Jonah Ray, Paul F. Tompkins, Janet Varney, and other special guests to be named. For details and links to all of these and more, go to the live appearance page at danagould.com. Finally, thank Christ, this program is brought to you by you. Although you may hear a couple of spot ads here and there, this show has always relied on its listeners for support, and we never fail to appreciate you. Nor, I am proud to say, have we ever gone into profit. But if you are not a Sky Cadet already, please consider becoming one. If you like the show, go to danagouldhour.com and sign up for our Patreon. $5 a month gets you some extra audio content and video content and some other junk. We don't have graduated levels here at the show. $5 a month and you get some stuff. Don't be a shy cadet. Be a Sky Cadet. It's a simple deal for complicated times. And now, it's on to our filthy business. My guest today is someone of whom I have been a big fan for a long time, and I only just recently met him at the TCM Film Festival. He is the host of TCM's Noir Alley and is something of a living resource of all things noir. His new book is called Dark City Dames, The Women Who Defined Film Noir. He also wrote the seminal book, Dark City, The Lost World of Film Noir, Eddie Mueller's Noir Bar Cocktails, San Francisco Noir, Kid Noir, which is Kitty Farrell in the Case of the Marshmallow Monkey, which you would not be surprised to learn is a children's book. He's also written the next book on my reading list, essaying the film Gun Crazy, the origin of an American exploitation masterpiece. I mangle the title, but you get it. Ladies and gentlemen, the lovely and talented star of stage, screen, and song, Eddie Mueller.
Thanks for the big build-up, Dana. As long as there's no song involved, we'll be all right. Yeah.
And you're a novelist, which I didn't even touch on. You have a series of noirish mystery books based on a character, by and large, based on your father.
That is
would
correct.
I be correct in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. He was a boxing writer for the San Francisco Examiner. So I got. Is it safe to say it's a series of books if there's only two?
I have a series of marriages, and I'm on the second one. So
okay, good.
But I'm proud to say a limited series of marriages. I'm gonna hold this one. This one will end when I'm in a box. You seem to be one of those guys that you always have a story in your head that you're brewing up.
Oh, God,
and
yeah,
sure. You were born and raised in the Bay Area.
Correct. San Francisco, precisely.
Right, San Francisco Bay Area. And your father was a sports writer for the San Francisco Examiner?
Correct.
And then you also became what we'd like to call a journo.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing so illustrious as working for the flagship of the Hearst Empire, which they like to call the Examiner back then. Now it's like the pamphlet. It's not really happening anymore.
America's only newspaper.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of remarkable, Dana, because that's the only job my dad ever had. I mean, he started working at the Examiner when he was like 15 years old as a copy boy, and when he retired in 1978 or something, that was it. William Randolph Hearst was the only employer he had in his entire life.
That's amazing.
Yeah, stuff like that just doesn't happen anymore. You know, kids today have like 5 or 6 jobs by the time they're 30, you know.
Yeah.
And
sometimes all at once. Sometimes all at once. It's the only way to survive.
Yeah, exactly.
What neighborhood in the city did you grow up in?
Oh, a very nice one, Forest Hills, which was pretty ritzy, honestly.
Yeah, no, I used to live in the Richmond district.
Yeah. So like on right, there's Pacific Heights and all that stuff, which is the real Tony areas. And then out towards the west part of San Francisco, there's St. Francis Wood and Forest Hills are kind of the upscale places. And it was kind of mind-boggling that that's where I grew up. Because let me tell you, sports writers don't live there now.
No.
You could afford living there on a newspaperman's salary back in the 40s and 50s, but that is priced out now. It's all doctors and lawyers now. No, ink-stained wretches.
Schmucks with underwear. Yeah, I can't imagine. I lived in an apartment with a bunch of other comedians at 21st and Geary, and I can't even begin to comprehend what the rent on that thing must be now.
Unbelievable. So you guys were playing Holy City Zoo and the Other Cafe. And, yeah. And one of my first dates with my wife was at the Other Cafe.
Oh, really? When was that? What year was that?
That was late 80s. And not to be a downer.
Do you remember who you saw?
Yeah, Jane Dornacker, the late Jane Dornacker. Yeah, I
love it.
And that's because I remember with great fondness that wave of comedians in San Francisco, right? With,
Bobcat Goldthwait is one of my closest friends on the planet.
And Barry Sobel.
Do you remember the Alex Bennett show? Remember Alex Bennett?
I was on the Alex Bennett show a few times. Yeah.
As was I, probably on a weekly basis. That's fantastic.
With his assistant Lisa Carr.
Yeah, Lisa Carr. I'm still very good friends with Curtis DeMartini, the producer.
Oh yeah. And that guy would call in Bennett every day and go penis bagel, penis bagel, penis bagel, penis bagel.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah, the best part about my daughter going to Berkeley was I got to go up there more and more. I really love it up there. And if you're into film noir, it's you're kind of in the headquarters. You also worked for the Examiner?
No. I wrote a few pieces for the Examiner, but it's one of those things where if you're born into it, you kind of have to move away and then come back. They don't accept you if you're just standing right there in front of their face.
Yeah, you're never big in your hometown.
Exactly. So that's what I did. I worked other places and I've always made my living putting words together. I consider myself like a mason. I'm like a stonemason with words.
Yeah. No, I agree. And we're going to get into all your books, but you published a book. I bought it at the great Larry Edmonds bookstore on Hollywood Boulevard.
God bless those guys.
Yeah.
They're the greatest.
Because let me tell you something about Hollywood Boulevard in the summer. It makes its own gravy. But so I go down there any chance I get. But no, yeah. I bought it and then I went back and bought a couple other copies to hand to friends because what this book does, it's called Scoundrels and Spitballers. It was written by Philippe Garnier, but it was written, as you can tell by the name, in French.
Correct.
You published it in English, and it's writers and Hollywood in the 1930s, a lot of pre-code stuff. And what I love about it is that you sort of puncture the auteur theory, and it does all start with the writer. And these guys were lunatics, and not just the writers, everybody. It was insanity. And I don't know if it's, and I read a lot about that because I find it comforting to know that this world was always a lunatic asylum.
Right.
It just, the volume changes, the brightness changes, the contrast changes, but it was always an asylum. And, Diddy didn't do anything that Lionel Atwill didn't do backwards in high heels.
Oh, not exactly. To quote Alicia Malone's book, that's the title of one of her books. But you're absolutely right. And the thing that I love about that book is that it depicts Hollywood as like a frontier town where it hadn't quite galvanized itself into this corporate monstrosity, right?
Right.
I mean, anybody could show up, and if you had an idea to pitch, right? And that's why it's called Scoundrels and Spitballers, because a lot of these people who came there to make their fortune had just come from prospecting for gold in the Yukon or bilking people out of, real estate deals in Florida or something.
Yeah.
And like if you could spin a yarn, in the 5 minutes you got on a studio boss's carpet in his office, you could maybe walk out of there with a $10,000 check or something.
Yeah. Who was the guy that was in San Quentin? And
Robert Tasker. Tasker and Edwin Booth were the two guys that were jailbird writers. Yeah, that's one of the best chapters in the book, because it when the pictures came in and crime stories hit big in Hollywood, these guys in San Quentin started pumping out all these stories that Hollywood was buying up. Right. I mean, initially it was H.L. Mencken who got them started, because they submitted these things to literary journals like the Smart Set that Mencken edited.
And that was that before the American Mercury?
Or maybe it was for the Mercury. It was one or the other. I'm not absolutely sure.
H.L. Mencken was the dean of American letters, and
absolutely.
was sort of hard to get a modern day equivalent to him, but his reading him again is very soothing, because he's writing about today, but he's writing it in 1926.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But let me read something just so we can sort of define this, because it seems to be where the conversation is going. In the introduction of your book, Dark City, which is like everybody I know owns a copy of Dark City, The Lost World of Film Noir by Eddie Mueller. And it is a primer of American noir cinema. It's like it kind of gives you a great, it's like the physician's desk reference of film noir cinema. I'm going to read you a small...
I'm going to use that on the next edition. I'll put that on the next edition. Yeah.
Everything here is gratis. But I want to read the first couple lines from the introduction, because it really does define what film noir is. We were talking in the last episode about Blue Velvet, and Blue Velvet starts with a blue sky, a green lawn, a white picket fence, and bright red roses. And then you pan down to see the grass is foaming with bugs and weevils. That's what film noir is. What's going on? What's going on under the grass? And this is what you wrote. Film noir were a distress flare launched onto America's movie screens by artists working the night shift at the Dream Factory. Some shell-shocked craftsmen discharged mortars, blasting their message with an urgency aimed at shaking up the status quo. Others were firecrackers, startling but playful diversions. Either way, the whiff of cordite carried the same warning. We're corrupt. The nation's sigh of relief on VJ Day, which is Victory in Japan at the end of World War II, ought to have inspired a flood of happily ever after films. But some victors didn't feel good about their spoils. They'd seen too much warfare, too much poverty, too much greed, all in the service of rapacious progress. Unfinished business lingered from the Depression, nagging doubts about ingrained venality, ruthless human nature, unchecked urban growth, throwing society dangerously out of whack. Artists responded by delivering bitter dramas that slapped romantic illusion in the face and put the boot to the throat of the smug bourgeoisie. Still, plenty of us took it and liked it. Perfect description, and as timely today as it ever was.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Yes, all the elements that made film noir happen when it happened, we're seeing them all kind of reassemble again in the culture today.
Yeah.
It's really weird. And people had always asked me, like, over the past 25 years or so, you know, when I've developed like this, cottage industry in noir, people have asked, you know, will there be a resurgence of noir films? And I said, well, you know, they never really went away, but I'm very curious to see if that will happen now. Because the other thing that defines noir is it's minimalist, you know? These aren't big stories. These aren't the spectacles that you're going to see in the movie theaters.
Yeah, and it's hard to get a movie made. It's interesting as somebody, you know, as people that work in that business, it is a lot easier to get a $200 million movie sold than a $20 million movie sold.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think with the prevalence of streaming services and stuff, I think there's going to be a hunger for, when there's a hunger for content, and it gets, I think that's where smaller budget storytelling is going to go. It's going to gravitate all toward the streaming services, and I think you'll be seeing a lot more noir-centric stuff there, especially with women playing a larger role as the protagonists and things. We've seen this already with stuff like, you know, Aubrey Plaza did Emily the Criminal. You know,
great movie.
Yeah, that's a genuine noir film of this time. I mean, it's about this time the way the original films were about their time.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the story of the guy that has no money that ends up working for ICE, whose girlfriend is here illegally.
Don't you think that one's already in? They must be making that one now, right?
I hope. When people talk about things being great again, they're referring to this time. They're referring to the late 40s and early 50s and that period after World War II, where America, on the surface, was great. We were the leading economic force in the world. We were making great strides in culture and technology. We led the world. And that was the peak of these stories. Because what America as a culture is not good at is acknowledging the bullshit behind the whole thing. You know, I keep going back to George Carlin. You know, we were started by a group of slave owners who said all men are created equal. Let's just
yeah, exactly.
Which is not to say it's not a great idea. It's the idea is great, but you always have to acknowledge.
There's always the reality lurking behind there. And of course, you know, what that's all about, Dana, is just, it's who's in charge of telling the stories, right? So when people say we want to go back to that America that was so great, it was like, well, a very limited number of people got to tell the stories. And now that has changed, and more people are telling their stories. And this certain segment of society is saying, no, we want to go back to only one group is telling the story. Right. And everybody has to believe that narrative.
Right.
And the reality is there's all kinds of narratives. Everybody's got their own narrative, and it really is just a question of whose narrative will dominate, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing every single day in this country.
To that end, in Scoundrels and Spitballers, there's the story of Roland Brown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Roland Brown,
who was again a lunatic. And who worked a lot with Daryl Zanuck, a Titan, also lunatic.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're using lunatic a little loosely, I think, but I get. But it's just because they were they didn't have the constraints that the corporate mentality would put them under. Later.
Yeah, it was the Wild West.
It was the Wild West, and so a guy like Roland Brown could roll in, and he was kind of hooked up with gangsters and shady characters, and he was an eccentric. He was, Mark Hellinger was another one of those guys who really had a big influence on the noir era. But yeah, Roland Brown was a writer who just had a different way of doing things, and it was. And I'm so glad that Philippe wrote extensively about him, because he's been kind of lost to time. People don't really know much about his movies, and when you see his films like Quick Millions and Blood Money and movies like that were he was a like you
he was one of the first writer directors.
Exactly, and he was Zanuck really liked him, and those films were made at 20th Century Fox, right? And he just had a totally unique way of doing this that was so far ahead of its time. Because when you see those movies, he is like a Robert Altman or a Paul Thomas Anderson or something of the 1930s. I mean, the ordinary rules don't apply. I mean, he will tell his stories exactly the way he wants to tell them, and the normal pacing and the normal focus, like what you choose to focus on in a scene, is sometimes really odd.
Yeah, I think he's described in the book as an incrementalist. He looked like a movie star.
For a writer, burly, handsome guy.
Burly, handsome guy. Like you see like a photo of him on the set, and you think it's the two actors in the movie, and he's just directing Spencer Tracy in the scene. But he's this big, tall, handsome guy. He looked like Christopher Nolan, actually.
He did. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. He does look a little like Chris Nolan.
There's a story that he was living in a little apartment, Sunset and Gower, I believe, and the guy who lived above him taught him how to write, he said. And this guy who taught him how to write lived on a quart of milk and a quart of whiskey a day. And he was on his way out. Right away, the hero's journey. He's got his mentor. Joseph Campbell's already on the site. But he writes a story. He's got no money. Daryl Zanuck offers to buy the story for $5,000, and this is $5,000 in the 30s. Yeah. And he rips the script in half and storms out of the office like, $5,000, fuck you.
Yeah.
And then I think because it was so audacious, and Daryl Zanuck was something of an audacious man in his own right, he called him up the next day and said, all right, we'll just make a movie together. Which I don't know if today that would work.
Well, that's what's so amazing about reading that book, is it makes you long for a time when you could just, have a handshake deal. We're going to make this movie. And, of course, sometimes, people got thrown out windows and things like that when things went sideways. But I love all that stuff. And also Roland Brown was the first one. There's also a chapter in the book about Edward Anderson, who was a Southern newspaper man who wrote Thieves Like Us, the Depression-era novel Thieves Like Us. And interestingly, Roland Brown read Thieves Like Us and adapted it to make it into a movie way before Nicholas Ray showed up and actually made the movie, and Philippe actually found that script and read it and did a really interesting comparison of how much of Roland Brown's original screenplay ended up in the version of the film that it was later called They Live by Night,
right?
Instead of Thieves Like Us. And then later on, Altman did make Thieves Like Us with Keith Carradine and Shelley Duvall in the 70s. But
yeah, that's one of his. Is that that was just before Nashville? I think
so. I think.
Yeah.
I honestly can't remember the order of those things. Yeah. I know that
it's not one of his like millstone.
Oh God, no. No. Like I think it was between The Long Goodbye and Nashville. He did Thieves Like Us, and
he had a couple of those movies like Three Women and Quintet. He had a couple of these weird. He had a lot of these weird little movies.
Quintet was later in the 70s. Yeah. I think that was like 78 or 79. It was very funny when I did because we met, as you said, at the TCM Festival earlier this year. And I also met Keith Carradine, who was the star of Thieves Like Us. And it was very interesting because he told me that he had agreed to make this picture with Altman, and he's in a hotel room someplace, and They Live by Night comes on, and he hears the character names from the movie he's making, and he had no idea that there was another version of this film. Amazing. Like Altman never told him that Nick Ray had made it, like 25 years earlier, and I said, "Wow, that must have been amazing. What did you think of the movie?" He said, "I turned it off immediately."
Yeah, I can understand why.
I didn't want it to influence me in any way. I didn't want to look at Farley Granger in the way he played the character.
Yeah. No, I remember it's so funny when that happens. There's a famous lost Lon Chaney Sr. movie called London After Midnight, which was this vampire movie that
Dana, it's now the holy grail of lost movies.
Yes.
Well, von Stroheim's Greed and London After Midnight are the two.
Well, did you see the reconstruction of it? They did I believe Roddy McDowell had something to do with that reconstruction. I think that he actually provided a lot of the film photos for it. So
now, are you talking about Greed or London After Midnight?
London After Midnight.
Okay, because both of them have been quote unquote reconstructed through still photos and things.
Well, the thing you realize when you watch the reconstruction of London After Midnight is that it was later made as Mark of the Vampire.
Right.
I was like, they made this movie.
That was, who was that? Henry Hull, I think, was the actor.
No, Bela Lugosi is in Mark of the Vampire.
Oh, Bela Lugosi, okay.
And I believe it was directed, I think it was directed by Browning again. But it's weird because Lon Chaney Sr. was going to play Dracula, but he died, and that's how Bela Lugosi.
I see. Okay.
This knowledge is why my life is just an avalanche of hot chicks. The fascinating thing about Scoundrels and Spitballers and these stories is that these people led those lives. Yeah. Like they're every bit as crazy and fascinating as the stories that they're telling. Your newest book is called Dark City Dames, which essays 6 or 7 film noir, femme fatale actresses.
Yeah, I chose them because they had to sort of be synonymous with film noir. Right. I mean, there are other actors and actresses, and also I chose them because they weren't huge stars.
Right. It wasn't Barbara Stanwyck.
Right. It's not Barbara Stanwyck. It's not Lana Turner or Joan Crawford or it was Marie Windsor and Audrey Totter and Jane Greer and Colleen Gray and Anne Savage and Evelyn Keyes. Those are the 6 actresses. And Evelyn's a wild card because she's not known exclusively for film noir. But I loved talking with her because she was famous for being in Gone with the Wind.
But she has the most film noir life. But Evelyn Keyes is
absolutely.
I wanted to unpack a little bit of you read these stories of, and Evelyn Keyes is a great example of what these people went through. I just read I just interviewed Bert Kearns, whose most recent book is Shemp, with an exclamation point, as it should be. But it's a story. It's the story of the Three Stooges and the Shemp specifically. But you realize that when these guys were in music hall, their life was brutal.
Oh, yeah.
Brutal. And, they're getting hit in the head hard repeatedly so it can be heard in the back of the hall 3-4 shows a day. And they all died by maladies that can be traced back to repetitive injury.
Yeah.
There's a case to be made that Mo Howard killed every stooge. but it is that these people put their lives on the line, and without getting too graphic, describe Evelyn Keyes' story, because it led to one of your more interesting collaborations.
Well, she was just a kid from Galveston, Texas. And she shows up in Hollywood and she scores right off the bat. I mean, she gets a contract with Cecil B. DeMille, like practically the day she shows up. But the thing that's so interesting is how, what you see depicted on the screen is so far afield from the lives that these people actually led, because her first husband, they had a very tempestuous relationship. Evelyn had already been, had an abortion.
Yeah, she was a victim of sexual assault from a very young age. And then assaulted by a director that she worked with.
Yeah, well, virtually all of them, I suppose.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, and it's so intriguing, Dana, because when I was writing, I wrote the book back in the early 2000s when these women were in their late 70s. And I'm so glad the book has been republished. I didn't really change much of those 6 profiles. I added 10 additional profiles. Some of the women I knew, but some of them I just included because their story needed to be told. But so much had happened from the time that book was first published, like the whole Me Too movement, that it was really interesting to me to realize that a lot of the women I talked to would kind of scoff and say, these girls today think they've got it tough. Like what I went through,
I know,
was
and
just
it's
unbelievable.
By the way, and they're right.
Yeah,
it's you have no in the same way that Sid Vicious and Johnny Rotten have nothing on Hank Williams and, these early country guys from the 30s and 40s. It was a lawless time.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyway, Evelyn was really, the thing that impressed me the most about her was all the crazy stuff she went through, but she just had this sense of herself. It took her a long time to find it, but when she did figure out who she was, she just recreated her whole life. So she did have this, Harry Cohn was kind of, you would say today that he was abusive to her. Mm-hmm. Charles Vidor was the husband who raped her. I mean, it was interesting that in the book, I actually had a little go round with the publisher because they thought it was harsh. And they wanted me to take out the word rape, that he raped her, right? And I said, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do that,
Yeah,
because that's what he did, and they were married. But that's what he did.
That's a conundrum that I understand. I remember when, in a weird sort of parallel, when the movie Django Unchained was released. And Spike Lee criticized Quentin Tarantino for the use of the N-word in the film. And Tarantino's response, I thought, was really smart when he said, "Oh, did you want me to make it seem like slavery was polite, that they respected these people?" And it was like, yeah, no, you have to use that language. It's brutal language describing a brutal thing.
Absolutely.
And you have to acknowledge it. And there's just a human, I think if you have empathy, there's an innate desire to soften that. But you have to be really, as you were, really rigorous in holding yourself to like, yeah, no, this is tough. This is tough stuff.
Yeah. Don't you think in the case of that thing with Django Unchained, I think that Spike's problem with that is I think he thinks that Tarantino is a little too gleeful and playful with it. And I think that is what is offensive to, and by the way, Spike,
Yeah, and I don't I see both sides of that. I certainly think he's gleeful and playful with it in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Coming out of his mouth. And, when you watch that now, it's that scene when Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta show up at his house, that seems pretty like, it's,
fascinating. This is a fascinating subject to me because it's like people talk about cultural appropriation. And you could argue that cultural appropriation is what America is all about. I mean,
it is
because we have always talked about the melting pot. This is the melting pot. Well, if it's a melting pot, that means there's going to be cultural appropriation or cultural amalgamation or something. And, if you've read, if you know Quentin or you've even just read his book, Cinema Speculation.
Yeah, I have, yeah.
You know that he grew up on those films. He grew up on blaxploitation films and all that stuff.
And he grew up in Black culture.
Absolutely.
I mean,
And I just, I just always think you have to kind of look at what the motivation is behind the use of it. I can certainly tell the difference when people are using the N-word or something. I can tell the difference between them doing it for the effect of saying, isn't this horrible? Right? Versus this is really fun and we're going to get away with this and blah, 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 which is pretty reprehensible.
Right.
But, such subtleties are very difficult to come by in our culture today.
One of my stand-up specials, I Know It's Wrong, had a whole thing about the R word and the R word's ascension into the rarefied air of the N word and the C word. And in the course of doing that bit, I say all three words. But I say it, but this was 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that bit has been cut from the reissues of that special, and I'm not 100% unhappy with that.
Yeah,
because it can be misappropriated. Amy Poehler just released a statement like yesterday, 2 days ago, about we all misappropriated things when we did sketch characters,
right?
And I find myself. What I fear is on the wrong side of that argument where I'm like, well, yeah, but it's like, can you not, where's the line? Can I play a French guy? I'm Irish. Can I play anybody that isn't me?
Well, part of me, I love
I can see The Party.
Yeah. Yeah, Peter Sellers. That's pretty whack. I mean, Peter Sellers' entire career, you have to kind of call into question.
But it is like, and the whole point of The Party is, it sounds funny. There's nothing about that character that needs to be Indian.
Yeah, he wanted to play it that way. You know?
So that I see, but is Merkin Muffley and Dr. Strangelove. Well, he's not American. How can he play an American?
Yeah.
And I know, yes, punching down. We're talking about white people playing non-white people. I get it. I know.
But I think it's just the culture goes through these changes, and I hope it's progressing. Right. I always like to say that history is like a wheel. But it's always rolling forward. We repeat stuff constantly, like we never can learn, but the wheel is moving forward. So these people who say, let's make America great again, like they're saying, let's throw it in reverse and go backwards. Guess what? That does not work. There is no way. History does not go in reverse.
Yeah. Our culture and our politics are two separate things. And, it is always, it's two steps forward, 3 steps backward, 4 steps forward, 5 steps backward in the 30,000 foot view. And we're getting a little far afield now. But when the history of the early 21st century is written, I think the angle will be America elected a black man as president, and half the country's brains broke.
Yeah.
And it took us a generation to recover from that. And that's something that Obama and David Axelrod have acknowledged. Like they have both said, we underestimated how shocking this was to 48% of the population.
My favorite comment about cultural appropriation is that joke that Ricky Gervais tells. Okay, so this is pretty funny. Because he talks all about it, like, how everybody got in an uproar because Adele wore cornrows in her hair, and it's like she's a white woman and she can't do that. And somebody sings in a particular, and he said, well, what about all these black guys in the hood that use the N-word all the time to talk to each other? That's ours. We created that word. we want that back. They can't use that. That's ours. Wow. And I just thought, wow, that's a pretty ballsy joke.
It's a pretty ballsy joke. Well, and it's so funny because what is interesting is on the right, that argument is made. There's a really, really great clip. I don't know what it's from, but look, it's Delroy Lindo, and he's on some show on Fox. And this white guy is saying, like, I turn on the car radio and I hear N-word this, and it's okay for them to say it, but I can't say it. And the underlying, the underlying truth of is, yes, exactly. That's exactly right. You can't. They took it back.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That is exactly right. And if you can't understand that, then you do not get it. You just do not get it.
Watch the clip because Delroy Lindo goes, you want to say it? Say it. Say it right now. And it's so uncomfortable. And then he goes like this. He goes, come on, I'll say it with you. And you can see this guy wanting to cry, deservedly so.
Perfect.
Your story on the life of Evelyn Keyes and these people that really struggled and survived. That was read by Tab Hunter. Who then reached out to you.
That is correct. Yeah.
Go into that a little bit if you don't mind.
Tab, when Evelyn became a writer, later in her life, she wrote her own autobiography, which I highly recommend, called Scarlett O'Hara's Younger Sister. And she wrote for the LA Times. She had a column in the LA Times called Keys to the Town. And she was.
When was this? What year was this?
This was in the 70s. I mean,
I love it.
And she was great. She was a terrific writer. Anyway, so
I just wish I had a column. So when I got into an argument with somebody, I could end it with, "You'll read about this in my column."
Perfect. Yeah. So she knew Tab because they had kind of worked on a film project or a screenplay, developed a screenplay together, and nothing ever came of it. But she mentioned to Tab, like, you should read this guy's profile of me. I think it was pretty good. And Tab was trying to put his autobiography together, and it had been unsuccessful. And speaking quite frankly, part of the reason it was unsuccessful is because he was using gay writers, right? Because people who may be listening who don't know that Tab Hunter was gay, He was the biggest heartthrob in 50s Hollywood, but he was, he was closeted. He had a relationship with Tony Perkins, and they all would go out, with their beards and all that stuff. And anyway, so Tab met me, introduced by Evelyn, and we talked because he was looking for a writer to do his autobiography with him. And
now, I'm just curious, where did he live?
He lived in Montecito, right up above Santa Barbara, right?
They all live up there.
Yeah, well, he lived down the hill from Jeff Bridges, and up the hill from somebody else. But and it was a great experience. I mean, it was 2 years of my life working with Tab, and it was very interesting, Dana, because at that point I only had a couple of books to my credit, and they were movie books. Dark City Dames, obviously one of them, but and the novel. But I had not written a biography or anything like that, So I got called back to New York to Simon & Schuster, that was going to publish the book, to meet the editor. And I thought it was an audition for me, like we got to see if this guy is actually up to snuff, right? And I went into the office and I started talking to this guy. His name was Chuck Adams, very esteemed editor back there. And he just stopped me immediately and said, Eddie, don't, you're not auditioning, because I know your books. I've read your stuff. I have no problem with you at all. My question is Tab going to be gay enough in this book? Because we bought this book because we have to have the story of the biggest male star in 1950s Hollywood was actually gay. But Tab was now in his 70s and never used the word gay. I mean, he was still kind of in the closet. Yeah, I mean, he was definitely of the, if you know.
Right.
That was Tab's thing. But if you're going to do a book,
confirmed bachelor.
Yeah, confirmed bachelor. And but if you're going to do a book, if you're Simon & Schuster and you want to publish a book and have a bestseller, and it's 2004 or whatever it was, then you have to own it. You have to come out, all the way out. So honestly, Dana, my job was to bring Tab all the way out, which is kind of interesting because he was more comfortable doing that with a straight guy.
That was my question, because you're a noir writer. You're straight. My
dad was a boxing
report.
Stuff,
you write about whiskey. You write about whiskey and stuff like that. So, in a way, I guess in a way, it's that sort of only Nixon could go to China. It's like,
well, but I'm also from San Francisco.
Right. I think that helped. I think that helped.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in the whole, gay revolution time in San Francisco, and so it wasn't, there was nothing shocking to me there. So it was interesting because I was just the storyteller, and my job was to just tell his story as effectively as possible. I did not go, and that's what I told him. I said, look, here's the deal, right? Your sexuality is going to be a big part of this book, but it's not going to be the whole book. He says, we're going to tell your life story, and you're going to tell me what the priorities were in that life, and a full portrait of you will emerge. And that's what happened. And he was very, very pleased with the book, and to the degree where he would take me with him to, when he would go on these little book tours and do signings and stuff. He didn't try to hide me at all. Like, I had this guy work on the book with me. He wanted me to get full credit. I mean, he put my name right on the book. It's Tab Hunter with Eddie Mueller.
Now, I'm wondering if on that tour, was there a lot of gay guys in their 60s and 70s that were only also now just living out, so to speak?
Yeah, I'm sure. And it was, yes. I mean, the answer is yes. I mean, when we do these signings, it was a fascinating thing because, the line would form and it would be a woman in her 60s or, 70s saying, "You were my idol, when I was growing up." And he'd sign to her. And then the next guy would be the guy saying, "You were my idol. I was in love with you when I was a boy," and it was everybody. Everybody loved Tab.
And he was living a double blind because he wasn't Tab Hunter either.
No.
His real name was
Art Galeen.
Yeah, Art Galeen.
Art Galeen, yeah.
And so they create this completely fabricated persona, 50s Hollywood. They create this fake version of you. So that's not the truth. And the real you, Art Galeen, can't live. There's not even Art Galeen can't be Art Galeen either.
No, it really is kind of amazing. But but Tab was inevitable as a movie star because, when he was a boy going to school, girls would chase him around the schoolyard. And I mean, it was weird because it was really uncomfortable for him because he didn't get it.
Right.
It was all just because he was so freaking handsome. He was so good looking. Even when he was 12, he looked like, he belonged on Mount Rushmore or something. and everybody was into Tab, everybody. So it was inevitable that, a Hollywood agent would see him and say, "You should be in pictures." He couldn't act. He couldn't act at all. I mean, it was literal on the job training.
And I'm assuming that his time in Hollywood was just a parade of beards.
Oh yeah, and
were the beards also lesbians? Because I know that happened a lot.
No, I don't believe so.
Wasn't that the Charles Lawton Elsa Lanchester marriage?
That is true, but I don't think that was necessarily the case with Tab. I mean, and honestly, it wasn't my place to dig that far into it,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was believing what Tab was telling me, but he had very dear female friends.
Sure.
He was very close to Natalie Wood. They were in a bunch of pictures together, and Venetia Stevenson was a very good friend of his. And, he all through his life, he had a lot of female friends. He was very close to Harry Cohn's wife, Joan. Right. That was a really interesting relationship. And that almost turned into one of those weird marriages where if she was going to leave Harry Cohn, she said, "I'd do it. And, we could get married." Because, it was her, Lawrence Harvey. Right.
Yeah.
And as Tab always said, this was hysterical. I said, "Was Lawrence Harvey gay?" And he goes, "Nah, just British."
I don't know if this is true or not. I'm just quoting somebody. I asked somebody who knew Vincent Price if Vincent Price was gay, and this guy said Vinny didn't care what side of the street he drove on. And I don't know if that's true or not. I don't want to talk out of turn. There's. I know that Rock Hudson had an arranged marriage with his agent's secretary.
Correct. Yeah.
Who he didn't even know. I don't think he even knew her.
It just, because the dark media back then, which was, social media now, but that was like Confidential Magazine. Hush Hush and Whisper and all that stuff. They were digging around for stuff that would be salacious that they could sell magazines with. And in the parlance of the day, they wanted to know who was Lavender. Exactly. And, Tab was arrested, in a big, raid of a gay party in Hollywood. And I didn't know that. What year was that? That was 54, okay, so when that would kill you. Oh yeah, and it's interesting that they gave up Rock Hudson instead because Tab was protected. So it was mentioned, but it didn't really blow up. And to his credit, you never hear anything good about Jack Warner, right? Nobody ever says a good word about Jack Warner. But to his credit, when all of this blew up and it looked like Tab's career was going to get blown sideways, Jack Warner looked at Confidential magazine and he said, "Today's news, tomorrow's toilet paper."
Right.
That's what he said. And it was like, I don't care. It's going to blow over, and it didn't really affect Tab's career at all.
Who was the actor? It's like Cary Grant. It was somebody big that killed somebody with their car.
Oh, there have been several of those,
right?
actually.
But then and I believe it was Jack Warner. They took a guy whose contract was almost up, like an executive, and they said, "You did this, and you're going to go to an honor farm for 4 months, and then you'll work here for the rest of your career."
The vehicular manslaughter stuff. I know John Huston was one, and Clark Gable. I was just reading about it. Yeah, killed somebody in his car, and MGM just made it go away.
Yeah, I was reading a book about Eddie Mannix.
Yeah, he was the fixer. Eddie Mannix was the fixer.
Yeah, and Eddie Mannix actually was involved with Roland Brown. He fabricated a story about Roland punching an executive in the face.
Exactly. Boosted his reputation considerably.
Yes, it really did. Before I let you go, I want to talk about a book that you've written that is my next read. When I'm done, Scoundrels and Spitballers, which is an essay. I guess it's a monograph, an essay. It's a book on the film Gun Crazy.
Right.
Which is, it's funny because, and we were talking about when we met. We were talking about Lost Highway, but I was also thinking about and I was saying how Wild at Heart, when Wild at Heart came out, in 91 or 90, it wasn't, a lot of people didn't like it. It was half and half.
Right.
But then within 3 years, you had True Romance, Natural Born Killers, and then a couple others.
Yeah.
That were basically pastiches of Wild at Heart. But Wild at Heart is really a pastiche of Gun Crazy.
In a way,
I exempt Badlands because that's more of a character study. It's more of a serious character study.
Badlands is clearly based on the Charlie Starkweather story, and Carol Ann Fugit. But
there's a I don't want to say cartoonishness, but there's a giddiness to Gun Crazy.
That's a really good word to describe it. Yeah,
that exists in those other films.
Absolutely. And Barry Gifford, who wrote Wild at Heart, is a huge film noir fanatic. He's written his own book. It was originally called The Devil Thumbs a Ride, but Barry's an enterprising guy. He's put that book out like 4 or 5 times. He just sent me the latest edition of it, right? Which has a different title, but it's still the same book.
The world is so small. My friend Chris did the graphic novel of Barry's book, from which the term Lost Highway is taken. It's called Night People.
Night People. Okay. Yeah.
My friend Chris Condon did the graphic novel adaptation of that.
Cool.
So it's a tiny little world. Barry Gifford co-wrote Lost Highway, which is something of a noir.
Yeah, I've actually shown it with Barry, and he's funny because he can be a little disingenuous when he's saying, "No, I don't think I was influenced by this or that." Because, if Patricia Arquette in Lost Highway isn't doing Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity with that blonde wig, which is styled precisely like Phyllis Dietrichson's hair.
Yeah, she goes from Betty Page to Barbara Stanwyck in one movie.
Precisely. Anyway. I love all that stuff. But you're absolutely right. Gun Crazy was really that's why the subhead of the book is The Origin of American Outlaw Cinema. That's because that's what it is. That's the first movie. And the thing that's fascinating about that, Dana, and you'll see when you read the book, is the thing that makes that movie so unique for its time is that the characters are totally amoral. They just like shooting guns. And it's like foreplay for them. And I mean, it's a total replacement for the sex that can't be shown, is this hopped up, as you said, giddiness about it's clear to me that the guy in Gun Crazy is a virgin, right?
Well, that's also, I believe, Clyde.
Yeah,
Barrow?
Clyde Barrow and Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, Barrow. I said Barrow. Clyde Barrow was impotent, was he not?
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the guns become, a symbol for.
I've never thought of that. Guns as a phallic replacement.
Yeah, how about it? And what a surprise that is.
How strange that they're big in our culture. Anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so, but that's true. Gun Crazy was just the start of so much, and it influenced European cinema, right? Because Jean-Luc Godard's Breathless is clearly inspired by Gun Crazy, and then that in turn inspired Benton and Newman to write Bonnie and Clyde.
Right. Yes. Yes.
And so it like I said, it's this wheel that keeps moving forward, and people are, borrowing this stuff and interpreting it. Yeah. And then, and that's how all this stuff works.
Let's give those chimpanzees a couple of flamethrowers and see what happens.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny. When I've gone around the world and done a lot of film festivals and served on juries at film festivals and stuff, and it never fails to amaze me that when you go to a foreign country and you go to a multiplex and you look at the posters for what's showing, only the American films have the guns. There's just guns all over the posters. Everything is a confrontation. Everything is a gun pointed at the person looking at the poster.
And it's always pointed up.
Well, it's either up or God forbid. It's like if you look at the new, like The Working Man, the Jason Statham movie, where it's he's got his legs spread and the gun is between his legs and it's pointing at you. It's like, I don't think this is symbolic enough.
Yeah, no need for Freud here.
Yeah. But it's amazing because I've always noticed that. It's like movies from other countries do not have weaponry prominently displayed on the posters. Only the American films.
Gosh, I could talk to you all day. Let's go down the bibliography really quick. Go to your local bookstore or your online bookseller of choice. Try not to automatically go to the first one that comes up if you can avoid it. They have enough money. Among your books, Dark City Dames: The Women Who Defined Noir, Noir Bar. Eddie Mueller's bar cocktails. You were a bartender, were you not?
I was a bartender once upon a time, so I like to say I made one positive contribution to society.
Dark City, The Lost World of Film Noir, San Francisco Noir. And I would definitely pick up Gun Crazy, The Origin of American Outlaw Cinema, which is really, that movie was so ahead of its time, and so much more. Eddie, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really super appreciate it.
A pleasure, Dana. This was great fun. I was really looking forward to it. I'm so glad you invited me. I hope you invite me back someday.
To be continued.
Beautiful.
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
Film noir is a very American film genre. All the more so in that it has a French name, and its earliest practitioners were German, Russian, and Hungarian immigrants. It started on the page, of course, in the early days of the Great Depression, which is fitting, because film noir is nothing if not a meditation on the dark, seedy underbelly of the American dream. For example, in 1929, the first year of the Great Depression, Dashiell Hammett published his first novel, Red Harvest, which told the story of a murder investigation by the Continental Op, a private eye employed by San Francisco's Continental Detective Agency. But he wasn't investigating just any old murder. It was a series of murders in a corrupt Montana mining town, which had been taken over by gangs in the wake of a nasty labor dispute. The key word being corrupt. The story of Red Harvest is the story of dirty dealing, backroom arrangements, and business interests being put first at the expense of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not the image America was selling to the world, but a quick glance at any newspaper in 1929 will tell you that that image was only that, an image, a mirage, an illusion. That's why they call it a dream. The story of Red Harvest was inspired by a true event, the Anaconda Road Massacre, where guards for the Anaconda copper mine opened fire on striking workers, killing one and seriously wounding 16 others. Hammett would go on to write other novels, The Maltese Falcon, The Glass Key, both of which would be made into classic films. Other giants of the genre appeared at this time, often in the pages of The Black Mask, a monthly pulp fiction journal started by H.L. Mencken, the Dean of American Letters. It was H.L. Mencken who famously coined the phrase, "No one ever went broke underestimating the intelligence of the American public." The term film noir was coined by French film critic Nino Franck, in referring to, quite literally, the dark films coming out of Hollywood during the 1940s and 50s, the heyday of film noir. Now, these were dark stories, tales of desperate men and women looking for a way out, full of human failings and, with rare exception, the architects of their own demise. And if the economic struggles of the Great Depression set the stage for film noir, it was World War II and its aftermath that raised the curtain for a mass audience. These were also physically dark films. The 1930s saw a flood of German and Eastern European immigrants, artists like Fritz Lang, Michael Curtiz, Robert Siodmak, Billy Wilder. They came to Hollywood fleeing Nazi Germany and brought with them the film techniques of German Expressionism, using light, or the lack thereof, to symbolize the dark world the characters lived in. These films weren't blasted with light in every corner of every set. The characters lurked in the shadows. Sometimes entire scenes were played in silhouette. The play of light and shadow was one of the major elements of film noir, along as recurring stories and characters such as the world-weary private investigator, like in The Big Sleep or The Maltese Falcon. Often one who had served in World War II and had seen too much carnage to have anything other than a cynical eye towards humanity. There's the mysterious stranger with a troubled past, trying unsuccessfully to go straight, like in Out of the Past. Or the law-abiding citizen lured into a life of crime, usually by a sexy dame with bad intentions, like in Double Indemnity. Along for the ride, shadows, fedoras, lots of cigarettes, and guns, lots and lots of guns. Guns, guns, guns. All God's children got guns. All kinds of guns. Gats, rods, bangers, pieces, Roscoe's, heaters. But they were always just an object, a prop. And in that they were underserved. America, more than any other country, has been in love with guns from the jump. But it wasn't until 1950 that this love affair was addressed head-on in the film noir classic, Gun Crazy. It always begins on the page. Not only the film, but this piece, which I have cribbed shamelessly from Eddie Mueller's excellent book, Gun Crazy, The Origin of American Outlaw Cinema. And everything I present here is but the tip of the iceberg. If this story intrigues you, you gotta get Eddie's book. Now, as for the story on the film itself, it began in the pages of the Saturday Evening Post, in a piece of fiction written by McKinley Cantor. What a name! He might as well have been named Caucasia Whiteman. Cantor was a war correspondent who had previously written a poem that became quite famous at the time, entitled Bailey Who Burned, about a U.S. soldier who pulled his parachute cord too soon and, well, you get the rest. Thanks for nothing, Gravity. Cantor then wrote a book about veterans returning home from the war entitled Glory for Me that was widely panned. This came as a shock to McKinley Cantor, who was nothing if not an ardent fan of McKinley Cantor. Despite the book's lukewarm reception by readers and critical pans, Sam Goldwyn picked it up to be adapted into a movie for MGM. Goldwyn wanted Cantor to adapt his own book into a screenplay, but Cantor decided instead to return to Europe to cover the end of World War II. This pissed off Sam Goldwyn no small amount, who wanted what he wanted when he wanted it and who he wanted it with. Cantor recommended Robert Sherwood, and it was a strong recommendation. Adapted by Sherwood, directed by William Wyler, Glory for Me was renamed The Best Years of Our Lives and went on to win Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor. Robert Sherwood picked up an Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, and McKinley Cantor got to listen to it all on the radio. Not only did he not get an Oscar, he wasn't even invited to the ceremony. To add insult to injury, Sam Goldwyn was so petty, he didn't even include the name of the original novel, Glory for Me, in the adapted by credit. It just says, screenplay by Robert Sherwood from a book by McKinley Cantor. Kinda shitty, but my guess is you don't get to be Sam Goldwyn without being a lunatic. So Sam Goldwyn was shitty in victory, and McKinley Cantor was shittier in defeat, and he moved on to his next project with a sizable chip on his shoulder. That next project was an adaptation of a short story he had written for the Saturday Evening Post 5 years earlier, called Gun Crazy. Gun Crazy, as originally published, told the story of Nelson Tarre, a bank robber blazing a trail of terror through the Midwest. We learn in the story that Nelson Tarre has been fascinated by guns since he was a child, but he can't bring himself to actually kill anything with them. This earns him the nickname Nice Nelly. That said, crime doesn't pay. It can't pay, especially if you're writing about it in the pages of the very conservative Saturday Evening Post. And so Nelson Tarre comes to a tragic end. Enter the King brothers. The King brothers read like characters from Barton Fink. In fact, I am surprised the Coen brothers never got around to including them in that or Hail Caesar, which supposedly takes place in the Barton Fink cinematic universe. Rotund and pugnacious, the King brothers were more carny barkers than movie producers. Their father was a bootlegger, and the King boys, Maurice, Frank, and Herman, learned about the business at his knee. They tried several business ventures. They tried owning apartment buildings while they were still teenagers. They ran slot machines. And then they went into a business venture with a big investor, Cecil B. DeMille. But he backed out at the very last minute. This pissed off the King brothers, much in the same way McKinley Cantor pissed off Sam Goldwyn. And spurred on by their anger, they figured, hey, if Cecil B. DeMille can produce a movie, so can we. And so they set about producing their first honest-to-God feature-length motion picture. It was called Paper Bullets, and it was a success. And it got them a great deal with Monogram Pictures, one of the great Poverty Row studios of the time. Their next film was Dillinger, which we talked about recently on this very podcast, as it made a star of Lawrence Tierney, and it made a boatload of money for Monogram Pictures and the rotund, pugnacious King brothers. They were eager to follow up on Dillinger's success, as well as add a little shine and prestige to their company. They felt they could do both by scooping up Gun Crazy, which was written by the guy who had just written the book that The Best Years of Our Lives was based on. Boom! But first, they had to get it past one important gatekeeper. The head of Monogram? No, their mom. That's right. The King brothers ran every major decision past their mom, Sarah Kaczynski, which is kind of sweet when you think about it. She approved. The King brothers were so in love with the idea of Gun Crazy that they offered McKinley Cantor the chance not only to adapt his own novel, but direct the movie itself. He'd never directed anything before, but they were willing to roll the dice. The King brothers hailed McKinley Cantor as the great American writer, which made McKinley Cantor think, wow, these guys are smart. They were partners. They were in love. They were off and running. They were even going to shoot the movie in Iowa, in the very county where McKinley Cantor grew up. He would officially be codified as a local treasure. They started having problems immediately, specifically with a guy named Joe Breen. Who? Exactly. In the 1920s, Hollywood was rocked by several national scandals. A famous director named William Taylor was mysteriously murdered. Beloved film comedian Fatty Arbuckle was accused of murder by raping a woman with a Coke bottle. He was completely innocent, but who has time for details? Terrified of the evil subversion of our precious culture at the hands of quote-unquote Hollywood, i.e., the Jews, 36 different states began drafting film censorship legislation, and film studios feared, quite rightly, that having to navigate each state's individual censorship laws would make film distribution impossible. William Hayes, a former Postmaster General and Presbyterian elder, was named the head of the Motion Pictures Producers and Distributors of America, and introduced what he called the Formula, a set of rules that would dictate the boundaries of morality and ethics that all major studio releases would have to adhere to. In other words, don't censor us. We'll censor ourselves. Cool? Cool. Joe Breen was in charge of enforcing what was then known as the Hays Code, or the Production Code. The code held sway from 1934 to 1968, with Breen at the helm for most of it. Working in feature films was an odd choice for Breen. The movie business had a very large Jewish contingent. All the major studio heads were Jewish, as were many of the actors, writers, and directors. And Breen, for his part, was a strident anti-Semite. Good fit. Breen once wrote to a friend, a priest no less, about his new job. Quote, "A rotten bunch of vile people with no respect for anything beyond the making of money. Here," meaning Hollywood, "we have paganism rampant, and in its most virulent form. Drunkenness and debauchery are commonplace. Sexual perversion is rampant. Any number of our directors and stars are perverts. 95% of these folks are Jews of Eastern European lineage. They are probably the scum of the earth." Welcome to Hollywood, Joe. Now, the King brothers, whose real name was Kaczynski, knew going in what Mr. Breen thought of them as human beings, but even they were surprised by what the production code objected to in the first draft of Gun Crazy. Now, here's the deal. McKinley Cantor was a self-infatuated gasbag among self-infatuated gasbags, but he was a self-infatuated gasbag who had some really good ideas now and again. The problem was, he could not get out of his own way. To quote Eddie Mueller, Cantor's script, by industry standards, was a mess. It was a rambling treatment close to 200 pages, formatted in a variety of ways. And later, quote, Cantor, full of ambition and self-importance, had created an epic, the cradle-to-the-grave saga of an outlaw spanning decades in a straight-ahead linear fashion, with dozens of scenes explaining what pushed young Nelson Terray to go gun crazy. End quote. But in all that silt, there was a nugget of gold. Gun Crazy would tell the story of how Nelson Terray was let down by society. In Cantor's script, Terray's father was a criminal who was killed by a posse. Then his stepfather kicked the shit out of him repeatedly. Feeling powerless, the young boy turns to the only thing that gives him a sense of safety and protection: guns. Children subjected to cruelty and brutality grow up into fucked up adults. That's a worthwhile message. That's a good story. You'd have to pull it out of the hundreds of other pages of gobbledygook, but it's a good story and it's worth telling. Not on Joseph Breen's watch. Joseph Breen wanted traditional, guilt-based, Christian moralizing garbage. Bad people are born, not made. Cantor's script had a sympathetic child surrounded by brutal, unsympathetic adults. The PCA demanded those roles be reversed. The adults would be stern but sympathetic, moral figures, and Nelson Ture would be an unsympathetic asshole. There's a scene in Cantor's original script where a school teacher literally whips Nelson, and later Nelson, to prevent another whipping, pulls a gun on him. This horrified Breen, because were the story to unfold that way, the audience would, oh my God, sympathize with Nelson's action. Under the production code, you could sympathize with a criminal, but never his crimes. Figure that one out. Basically, the PCA demanded that Cantor reverse the magnetic poles of his own story. Had he written Jaws, they would have wanted him to turn it into the story of 3 sharks chasing a giant person. McKinley Cantor refused to make any changes, which meant that the King brothers couldn't go ahead with the movie. I mean, they could make it if they wanted, but the production code wouldn't authorize it for distribution. So they were stuck. Now, they could have fired McKinley Cantor, but that would look terrible. A scrappy little company hires a big-name writer whose movie has just won Best Picture, and then they fire him. No. They had to get McKinley Cantor to walk off his own movie. What they did was brilliant. With Gun Crazy stuck in the mud, they gave McKinley Cantor a quick rewrite job. Could he do a polish on an adaptation of a play that they were making called The Last of the Bad Men? Whatever they had planned, it could not have worked out better. Cantor's quick polish became a massive overhaul. Like his draft of Gun Crazy, the script went on and on and on and on and on. He even went so far as to change the name of the goddamned movie from The Last of the Bad Men to Wicked Water. This allowed the King brothers the opportunity to give McKinley Cantor the notes that they wanted to give him on Gun Crazy to hopefully send the message. Since he wasn't attached to direct what was now called Wicked Water, they didn't have to tiptoe around anything. They could really let him have it, and they did. Quote, "The opening is too slow, too wordy. Sequences don't flow into one another. This looks like something you dashed off in a hurry without giving too much thought and effort to it." And then, after gutting him like a fish, they closed with, "Being a straightforward square shooting guy yourself, I know you'd want our honest opinion." Cantor's reply, again this is all printed in Eddie Mueller's book, did not disappoint. Quote, "Sirs, your proposals are infamous, nefarious, cowardly, dastardly, diabolical, inhuman, and cannot be complied with." End quote. Okie doke. McKinley Cantor, gone. The King brothers moved on to a real screenwriter, one of the best script doctors in Hollywood. Now, normally, they would not have been able to even approach affording this guy, but this guy had become somewhat infamous and had fallen on very hard times. So much so that they couldn't even use his name. Dalton Trumbo's script would be on screen, but his name would be nowhere near it. The House of Un-American Activities Committee was formed in 1938 to investigate disloyalty and subversive activities on the part of private citizens, public employees, and those organizations suspected of having communist ties. It picked up steam after World War II and the advent of the Cold War. Being accused of being a communist sympathizer was a deadly weapon in its day, and it was used and abused with wild abandon. Its most famous exploiter was Joseph McCarthy, after whom we now have the term McCarthyism. Joseph McCarthy would accuse a chair of being a communist if he didn't think it was comfortable, and he was able to destroy a lot of lives before he died in an alcoholic stupor at the ripe old age of 48. In 1947, the House of Un-American Activities began investigating alleged communist propaganda and influence in the Hollywood motion picture industry. Now, right out of the gate, it must be acknowledged that there were films made during World War II that were undeniably pro-Russian. Films like Mission to Moscow and Song of Russia. And you could make the argument that these films were pro-Russian propaganda. You could make that argument lying on your back with your feet up, because they were. What's often not mentioned is that they were made at the request of the White House. Because at the time, America was allied with Russia in the war against Germany, and these films were considered helpful to the war effort. After the war, especially under heat from HUAC, which was the House of Un-American Activities Committee, Hollywood pivoted to making anti-communist movies, like The Red Menace, I Was a Communist for the FBI, and John Wayne's Big Jim McClane, where he plays a heroic HUAC investigator investigating investigations in dark, scary, communist Hawaii. John Wayne, who did not serve in World War II, was a big supporter of HUAC. Dalton Trumbo, who did, was not. Now, a lot of people in the artistic community attended communist meetings during the Depression out of curiosity to see if communism held the answer to America's crippling unemployment problem. Attending these meetings were now a career-ending crime, as was, apparently, knowing someone who did and not ratting them out. HUAC wanted you to come forward and name names. You know, squeal. Dalton Trumbo thought that being a rat was more un-American than destroying the life of someone you knew because they went to a Communist Party meeting 20 years ago. He refused to name names, and that is how Dalton Trumbo became part of the Hollywood 10. Hundreds of lives were destroyed by what became known as the Hollywood Blacklist. In addition to the scores of people you've never heard of, big names like Lena Horne, Lloyd Bridges, Edward G. Robinson, Charlie Chaplin, Lee Grant, and Burgess Meredith lost work. Some, like Orson Welles, had to leave America entirely and live in Europe for years just to keep money coming in. But not the Hollywood 10. They didn't go to Europe. They went to prison. Cited for contempt of Congress, Dalton Trumbo, Alva Bessie, Herbert Bieberman, Lester Cole, Edward Dmytryk, Ring Lardner Jr., John Howard Lawson, Samuel Ornitz, and Adrian Scott all went to jail for contempt of Congress. Dalton Trumbo was sent to the Federal Correctional Institution in Ashland, Kentucky. Oddly enough, while he was serving time for contempt of Congress, the head of the HUAC committee that recommended him for prosecution, J. Parnell Thomas, also served a stint in the pokey for taking kickbacks. Go fig. Now, Dalton Trumbo was no less talented after HUAC than he was before, but he was now radioactive in terms of being hired. According to Eddie's book, when Trumbo met with Frank King of the King Brothers, initially at a restaurant, he advised him to cover up the script he was holding so that no one in the restaurant who saw them together would think that they were talking about work. King offered Trumbo the rewrite job at a fraction of his pre-HUAC asking price. Trumbo needed the gig and took it without reading a word of the script. The screen credit would go to a guy named Millard Kaufman, who was a non-blacklisted writer who agreed to work as Trumbo's cutout. Trumbo would do the work, Millard would be paid, and then Millard would slide the money to Trumbo. This whole setup had a great movie made about it called The Front. I think it was made in 1976 or 77, and it starred Woody Allen and Zero Mostel from the producers, who was, you guessed it, blacklisted. Dalton Trumbo turned Millard Cantor's overwrought script into a movie, telling the story of Bart Taray. Now, he was Nelson and Cantor's original script with the nickname Nellie, but Nellie was a gay slang in those days. I think it still is. Looks like they hired a couple of Nellies to run the Sweatabon. In a brief opening sequence, we see young Bart Taray, played by Russ Tamblyn, later of West Side Story, Twin Peaks, and most importantly, War of the Gargantuas fame. He's just a kid in the movie. In fact, he's billed as Rusty Tamblyn. We meet Bart, a young boy with no parental guidance. We soon learn that he's being raised by his sister. And with no boundaries or sense of direction, he finds solace and comfort in guns. He loves them. The sense of power, the sense of safety, the look, the weight, the feel. Trumbo's script takes pains to point out that, despite his obsession with guns as objects, he is incapable of killing. He is a messed up kid To be sure, but he is empathetic. He is not a killer. He just loves guns. So much so that when he sees one he can't afford, he just steals it and is immediately caught and sent to reform school. And from there, he is shipped to the army. The story picks up after he is discharged. Now, in Cantor's script, it follows him scene by scene throughout his life. He goes to reform school, we see it. He goes in the army, we see it. Trumbo dispenses with this entire backstory in 3 or 4 death sentences. Director Joseph Lewis made a very important decision. He didn't want a tough, macho actor to play Bart. He didn't want Humphrey Bogart, John Garfield, or Lawrence Tierney. Instead, he cast a guy named John Dahl, a young 29-year-old actor who had recently played one of the killers in Alfred Hitchcock's Rope. About Dahl, Lewis said, quote, "I wanted John for his kind of weakness, that kind of oddity," end quote. What he meant was John Dahl was gay. Closeted, of course, this was 1950, but a two-fisted film noir gangster he is not. John Dahl's Bart Teray does have an alien strangeness, a separateness, much in the same way clean-cut, non-threatening, also closeted Anthony Perkins would inhabit Norman Bates 12 years later. This was important to Lewis because he wanted Bart to be clearly dominated by his partner in crime, Dahl's co-star in the film, Peggy Cummins. Now remember, under Dalton Trumbo, Gun Crazy became a love story. The King brothers were pitched to Veronica Lake for the part, but by 1950, Veronica Lake was sadly well into her descent into drug addiction and alcoholism, so instead they found a young actress who could best be described as the Veronica Lake of Ireland, Peggy Cummins. Peggy plays Annie Laurie Starr, the brains of the outfit. Annie works as a carnival trick shooter. Lewis gives her one of the best entrances in film history. She bursts onto the screen, wide-eyed and apple-cheeked, dressed in a cute little Annie Oakley cowgirl outfit. She literally comes at you, all smiles, guns blazing, and then literally fires a shot right in your face. In the audience, Bart Teray reacts like a wolf in a Tex Avery cartoon. Annie Laurie Starr is the first thing Bart Teray has ever loved that is not a gun, and together they embark on their journey through life, pistols blazing. Of course, bowing to pressure from the production code, before they do anything, they stopped and got married. Natch. Director Joseph Lewis pulls off several amazing set pieces. The first bank robbery scene is stunning. Fun fact, it is shot in Montrose, California, just down the street from the very sanitarium where Bela Lugosi admitted himself to kick his morphine habit. In the film, Bart and Annie drive into town and park in front of the bank. Bart runs inside, and Annie stays outside waiting in the car, engine running. But she gets approached by a cop who, because she's pretty, starts chatting her up, and he won't shut up. She tries to get rid of him, but she can't. And when Bart emerges from the bank... Now, if you've seen Gun Crazy, you know how this scene ends. And if you haven't seen it, you should, and I'm not going to spoil it for you. But this entire scene is done in one take, with one camera, and no cuts. Little Peggy Cummins drove a specially outfitted Cadillac stretch limousine. Although it didn't look like that on film. All we see on film is Annie and Bart driving a car. But behind them, in the car, are the director, the camera operator, 2 grips, 2 sound men, and the script supervisor, all crammed in around a giant camera and a special jerry-rigged dolly track. Since the camera never went inside the bank, they didn't bother to get any permits. No pun intended, they stole the entire scene. In fact, when Dahl comes running out of the bank, now in real life, people in the bank just saw a guy in a trench coat run in and stand in the lobby and wait for a signal to run back out. But when he did run back out, people outside saw him and started screaming, "They're robbing the bank! They're robbing the bank!" And these people weren't actors. They were people just on the sidewalk. Gun Crazy was released in 1950, but despite the fact that it was so good, it could not catch a break. Bowing to pressure from Monogram, the King brothers changed the title from the short, punchy, descriptive, catchy Gun Crazy to the loftier and far more mediocre Deadly is the Female. Despite great reviews, the Los Angeles Times called it hell on wheels, having just as much continuous excitement as is possible to cram onto one screen. The LA Daily News called it a modern-day Macbeth. The Hollywood Reporter said the story is fast, actionful, frequently thrilling, and always suspenseful. But they did open their review by noting that the title sucked. The movie could not get any traction, and the title hurt. It was re-released several months later, now back under its original title, Gun Crazy, but by that time, the bloom was off the rose. Wasn't this movie just out? As pointed out in Eddie's book, Gun Crazy and the Origin of American Outlaw Cinema, the competition for screen time in 1950 was brutal. That year alone gave us Sunset Boulevard, All About Eve, The Asphalt Jungle, Destination Moon, In a Lonely Place, Father of the Bride, and on and on and on. Gun Crazy could very well have slipped into obscurity, except for, as usual, the French. Among Gun Crazy's fans were such French New Wave giants as Jean-Luc Godard and Francois Truffaut. Indeed, you can see a lot of Gun Crazy in Godard's Breathless. It also established a beachhead for a subgenre of American noir that is still thriving today. Kill crazy sociopaths finding love. You can see it in Bonnie and Clyde, Wild at Heart, True Romance, Natural Born Killers, and on and on and on. But it is Gun Crazy, my friends. That was the acorn that grew the oak.
I told you I was no good. I didn't kid you, did I?
What is it you want?
Bart, I want things, a lot of things, big things.
Look, I don't want to look in that mirror and see nothing but a stick-up man staring back at me.
You better kiss me goodbye, Bart. Because I won't be here when you get back.
Symbols. We're all familiar with them. There are shortcuts to vital information. That's why, to familiarize you with the movie rating symbols which will be used by this theater, we present the following guide for parents and young people. It is designed to inform parents about the suitability of movie content for viewing by their children. G, all ages admitted, general audiences. GP, all ages admitted, parental guidance suggested. R, restricted, under 17 requires accompanying parent or adult guardian. X, no one under 17 admitted.
And now, on with the show.
It is a warm, sunny, near cloudless day, high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf, here in the sun-baked dystopia that is the city of Los Angeles, in the People's Republic of California, in the former United States. We are joined today by a good friend and a frequent guest here on the show. She is the author of, amongst other books, Junk Film, Why Bad Movies Matter, and last year's Wire Mothers. She has a new book out entitled Out There in the Dark. Please welcome your friend and mine, America's au pair, Katherine Coldiron.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so glad to be here. I have never been an au pair, and I'm a very poor babysitter.
Trying to come up with something other than the girl next door. So there's so much I want to talk to you about. And this is a really interesting book. You wrote film studies, and then with Wire Mothers, you're moving into essays. And this is sort of a combination of the two. How would you describe Out There in the Dark?
Well, an interviewer described it to me as autocriticism, playing on the genre of autofiction, which is like autobiography that's fictional. And I wish that I had had that term when I was pitching the book years and years ago, because it is autocriticism. It's kind of an attempt to make sense of my life through film crit and also a little bit of fiction. So hybrid essays is kind of how I pitched it. And I think that's kind of what Autofocus, the press, wanted to pitch it as. But I don't know where you'd put it in the library.
I tell you, it was a fast read. I mean, I really tore through it. What I found, and this is my sort of uneducated take on it, it begins with the premise that film presents you a form of reality that we accept as real, but it's not. It's never real. Even in its attempts to be real, it's not real, as exemplified in your piece on the fact that the book, The Lifetime of a Fact, is not factual.
Lifespan, yeah.
Lifespan of a Fact.
Yeah.
Is not factual. And so to that end, you look at your own life in the same way. You adapt it to sort of your attitude towards film. The first point that you make is about The Sound of Music. And you make a point that I'd always sort of had in my mind that I'd never really articulated, that although that film, has an optimistic ending, the the period of time those people are facing is horrific.
It is, yeah. A climb through the Alps is not going to be it's not going to be good for him. There's a reason the film leaves off there. It's like, are you really going to show and set to music and joy this sort of climb through these horrible conditions? And in real life, they took a train. It wasn't an actual climb through the Alps, but in real life, and a climb through the Alps would not work with 7 children.
Yeah, no. Well, it would. You just wouldn't have 7 when you arrived.
It'd be more of a Donner Party through the Alps.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it sort of goes to my theory that every rom-com, the ending of every rom-com, I want to see the movie I want a movie to start with the end of a rom-com.
Do you though? Because then, it's.
Well, yeah, because I write comedy.
Drama.
Well, I write comedy, so I want it to be. But I do believe that people, and this sort of goes with the theory of your book, we want our lives to be like the movies. I think a lot of people get married or they get in relationships and they're really thrown when it gets difficult, because it's not supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be happily ever after, but happily ever after is fiction.
Yeah.
And I know people, especially I think when they're young, they can't process when they have a real insurmountable problem.
Yeah.
Because they don't see that in 27 Dresses or whatever it's called,
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I thought that was it's ripe for study, and especially now where our entire definition of reality is out the fucking window.
Well, yeah. One of the things I said in another interview was the line between real and fake is a very powerful opposition, and storytellers from Buster Keaton to Fox News know it. What kind of story you're going to tell about the world, whether you if you're going to choose to lie, then your power is unlimited. If you're going to choose to tell the truth, then you've got boundaries around what you're going to say, what story you're going to tell about the world. Liars, though, are not constrained by the truth, and thus not constrained to what kind of story they have to or can tell.
It's exhausting. And it was my fear when I became a parent, was what if my kids just refuse to do what I say?
Yeah.
It's just go to bed. No. Well, eventually there's nothing you can do. Fortunately they didn't, but it is, if you're not constrained, by any norm of reality, nothing can stop you.
Yeah.
You know, we're living in a Thomas Berger novel. What if people just stopped knocking on doors and just started coming in your house? Eventually, it just gets exhausting.
Yeah.
Yep. And there's really, I struggle with how to properly react, because you can't be your hair can't be on fire every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but on the other hand, one could say, yeah, they count on that.
They do. Yeah. Not to get too deeply again into it, but I would say that being in a constant state of crisis makes you vulnerable to whoever wants to come and take advantage of you. And that is something that a lot of storytellers in this country are relying on right now. And the thing that it makes me think of is, this is not going to be popular for me to say, but I figured out a while back that if you are constantly on a diet, you're always hungry and you're always sort of mentally weak, because you constantly got in the back of your head that you're hungry. And so the fastest way to kind of make 50% of the population less strong and capable than they really should be is to force them to constantly be on a diet. And that is why, that's why thinness is prized among women, because patriarchal values want us to be thin so that we'll be weak, not just physically, but mentally, because being on a diet is exhausting. And this is, in a way, this is the same thing that's happening. If you're in a constant state of crisis, you can't really think, you can't really function. And that is exactly where the right wants us to be.
Is that an unintended consequence? Because the 50s was incredibly patriarchal, but Marilyn Monroe, who was like the physical ideal by today's standards, would be overweight. And I don't say that's healthy or admirable.
I mean, I don't think it's an unintended consequence, no, but I also have a lot to say about the 50s and Marilyn Monroe.
It wasn't a great time, and she had a worse time. I'm aware of that because I have daughters, and they're of age, and I see the billboards that they drive by all the time.
Yeah.
And you want them to be healthy. And that's the language that their mom and I always kind of held ourselves to. Is this a healthy choice? Is this a healthy choice?
Right.
And I bring my own baggage to it because I was a super fat kid with older athletic brothers. So I'm trying not to.
That sucks.
Bring only 4 of them. So yeah, I tried not to project my own self-loathing onto them. You talk about the photo, I forget the name of it, but
it's called Burst of Joy.
Burst of Joy, and it's Colonel Sturm?
Yeah, Lieutenant Colonel, but yes.
Lieutenant Colonel Sturm, in relationship to your dad. So for those of you who don't know, Burst of Joy is a very famous photo about a Vietnam veteran, a Vietnam POW returning home and being greeted by his family. And tell the real story behind that photo and the reality of that moment. Because I know the photo, but I didn't know the story behind it.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard story. And the photo, if I describe it, a lot of you out there will be like, oh yeah, that one. It shows Lieutenant Colonel Sturm's the back of his head and sort of his body, and he's walking away from the camera. And in front of him is this family of people, particularly this older daughter. Both of her feet are off the ground. She's wearing platform shoes, and she's just got her arms wide open, and she's so happy to see her dad. And he had been a POW, I think, for 3 years at that point. This was during Vietnam. And it turns out that his wife had already written him a Dear John letter by the time that photo was taken. And the family broke up and he moved out and she remarried. And
Had he received the letter?
Yeah.
Okay. So he knew.
He knew.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's easy to villainize her, but we have no idea what her life is like.
No, I don't villainize her at all, especially the parallels between the story of Sturm and his wife and my father and my mother were very plain to me, because Sturm, in articles later, he was interviewed and he talked about, everything that I believed in, everything that I wanted out of my family, that was just dust. And I've been taken to the cleaners. And like, my dad is similarly bitter about what happened when he divorced my mother.
And you should say also that your father was in Vietnam. He was military. So the parallels are really sharp. Although your father wasn't a POW, he was, as they say, he was a career military, and he was, as they say, in the shit.
I don't know if he was in the shit. I don't know anything about his career in Vietnam. Like, I know basically nothing. I know that he was he was a Navy corpsman who traveled with the Marines. So like, he was the medical guy with this platoon of Marines. But that's all I know. And I think that I don't know. I think that it was very, very hard on him. That's kind of all I can assume. And I know that him being in the military was hard on us, me and my mom.
Of course.
Because we, this was like the sort of late 80s, early 90s is when his career was kind of peak ambition. I'm going to say, like, he had peaks in his career. He had a bunch of other things happen, but he was on deployments constantly during that time. And so he would be away for 6 months at a stretch. And during the first Gulf War, he was away for much longer than that, I think over a year. And
yeah, that's a lot
hard.
to ask. That's a lot to ask of a spouse and kids and everybody.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I would never villainize someone who was the wife of a POW for saying, no, I can't handle this. Like, I get it.
Yeah. And it wasn't like she was saying, get lost. She was just like saying, I can't do this.
I can't. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's understandable. And your father, so it's interesting that you say, and you do talk about this in the book, your dad told you, was it 3 things about his time in the service? And they were all really innocuous.
Just details.
Yeah.
Just things like, that they used to keep their toilet paper under the elastic band on their helmets, because then it would stay drier than if you kept it down further on your body. Stuff like that. Just really small details.
Yeah. I was just reading a story, because we don't know what these guys went through, and because they don't talk about it. And I'm sure you know this story. John Ford was running a documentary crew that shot D-Day. And afterwards, he got drunk for a month.
I'm sure he did.
Like, he literally just lived in a sleeping bag and completely fell apart.
Yeah.
Because that was and you just had to process that and to go on. You said that when you saw Apocalypse Now, it made you think
in high
of your
school.
dad.
Yeah, in a class. It was hard to see that, because and all war films tend to be hard for me. And I think it's just because, as with the photo, any of the men in front of me could be my dad, because I know so little about what he actually did. That
and your dad's still here?
Oh yeah, he's alive. We're estranged, unfortunately, but he forged his birth certificate to join the service earlier than was legal.
Oh, okay.
So, but he was also in Vietnam during the 70s, not during the 60s. So Apocalypse Now is specifically about kind of a much more heightened part of the war than my dad participated in, as far as I know.
Is Apocalypse Now? Is that during, Full Metal Jacket is the Tet Offensive.
I think
And that was 68. Apocalypse Now is earlier, is it? Or is it like 69?
I really don't know the answer to that.
I'm just going by the music. I know it's no, but I mean, I know, like, I think it's Get Off of My Cloud. Like, the music that they're playing, I know he's too good of a director to have had. I think Get Off of My Cloud is in the movie, so that wouldn't have been 67 because that song wasn't out yet. You know, that was what I was trying to gauge.
Well, I think Coppola was not trying to do a realistic film about Vietnam. I think he was trying to do kind of more of a tone poem about war.
Yeah.
And, maybe specifically about this war, but not tracing something historically sound.
Right.
And I mean, part of the reason for that is that he's bumping up against Conrad's novel, Heart of Darkness, and how, putting those two things over one another, you have this outline of a thing as opposed to like the real shape of the thing.
Yeah. That was a famously tight shoot with a clear cut script, and they knew exactly where they were going.
No problems, no health issues, nothing to interrupt, like no substances.
Yep. Stars showed
easy.
up, ready to work.
Yep.
No, the film, if you haven't seen the documentary Hearts of Darkness, it's one of the great, there are these films that you need the companion piece to the film. It's like a 2-film package. Like, you see Apocalypse Now, and you really need to also see Hearts of Darkness.
I think that's right. Yeah.
It's hard to. I'll go to our my go-to. It's hard to watch Plan 9 from Outer Space and not also see Ed Wood,
or vice versa.
Yeah, they complement each other in a beautiful way.
Yeah.
And then there are documentaries about movies that are better than the actual movie, which I was thinking about Lost Soul, the Richard Stanley movie. Yeah.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Which is a much better documentary than a film.
Yeah.
There's a story about the making of Apocalypse Now when they're doing the famous helicopter attack. That after they filmed it, they brought in some helicopter pilots that did it. Do you know the story?
Mm-hmm. No,
and
I haven't seen Hearts of Darkness in a really long time. So, but keep going.
So they bring in these guys, and that were pilots, and they say, we're going to run this footage, and you guys just talk to each other like you're the pilots, so we know, so we have stuff to put in. And they got right into it, and they kind of went there.
Mm.
And when they were done, they all broke down.
Oh, no.
Because they got into that, put that right up her ass. Like they really, and then they were able to immediately step out and see what they had to be to survive.
Right.
And they all kind of broke down. It's a really interesting story. And it's, again, like, yeah, the documentary is in its own way as powerful as the story it tries to tell, as the movie tries to tell.
Well, I'll tell you, the thing that strikes me about people, specifically people who were in Vietnam, because I grew up sort of with that around in the air a lot more than I think this generation has. By which I mean, like, people in this generation are used to Vietnam, to veterans talking about Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I'm used to veterans talking about Vietnam. Right. But in my experience, the people who are actually there don't talk about it. And the people who weren't tend to lie about it. And that's
it is like the 60s. If you remember it, you weren't there.
This is purely anecdotal. But one part of that anecdote is that I went to Mount Holyoke for my undergrad, and one of the history professors there was this guy who was very well regarded for his books about Vietnam. And people who took classes from him loved him for his stories about Vietnam and the way that he taught using these personal stories. Well, come to find out, all of that was not true. It was plagiarized or it was lies, because he never went to Vietnam.
Right.
And so that, against my father and other veterans that I've met who will not talk about it, is to me like, I'm sorry, I automatically do not trust that you can talk about it in a sane and reasonable manner. I don't think that you were there.
Did we ever talk about you going to Mount Holyoke?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I went to UMass.
Oh. Hey there, Scooby.
That's right. Five college bus system. There's one of the most realistic depictions of the way Vietnam veterans talk about Vietnam is in the movie Rushmore when Jason Schwartzman goes to Bill Murray, "Were you in the shit?" And Bill Murray just goes, "Yeah, I was in the shit."
Yep.
And that's the conversation.
That's all he's going to say about it. Yep.
But I talked to a guy, the man that ran the physical effects unit on my show Stand Against Evil was this older guy, and he worked with his kids. Just Bob, this old guy. And I worked with him for 3 years, just this, genial old guy. And then literally after like 2.5 years, we finally got a minute. I says, "How'd you get into this, Bob?" And it turns out that he was an ordnance man in Vietnam. And he just had like the details were too specific for him to have been making it up. But he just kind of had this, first I was a tunnel rat, and you'd go down there, and, the thing is, they had these bamboo sticks, and they'd tie these snakes to them, and they just stick them in the roof of the tunnel. So you got to be careful of that. You get bit around the head. It's just these guys that just like, but his job basically was when they left, they had all of this ordnance, explosives that they couldn't bring home, but they also couldn't leave there. So they just had to go around and blow it up.
Yep.
Yeah. And he said his biggest takeaway from Vietnam is he goes, "I can't believe I have all my fingers."
Well, he brought his hands back.
Yeah, he brought his hands back. But he was just like, it was clearly like, you, and his counselor goes, "No, that's true. He was there." I mean, but he was just, these guys, you just can't face them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, "Hi, here. I just took this off a corpse." Okay. Sounds good.
Oh, God.
Sounds good. Another weird thing we have in common, we have both been the victim of extensive dental work.
Well, so the more I talk to people about this book, the more I find that everybody has a tooth story. And most of those tooth stories are trauma stories.
Yeah.
So like, I agree that is something we have in common. However, I think you would be surprised how many people we have it in common with. And I really was like, it was a good day when I stumbled upon the fact that veneers were invented for the movie industry in Southern California. Like that was a good day because I can use this to tie my whole essay together.
Right. But you had to have veneers when you were a kid because you had an infection and you were allergic to antibiotics and it discolored your teeth.
Mm-hmm. I was allergic to
it wasn't a vanity thing. It wasn't an orthodontia thing.
Yep. I'm allergic to amoxicillin and erythromycin. And those were, when I was a kid, the two main antibiotics that were being used for ear infections. And I had chronic ear infections. So they used a kind of antibiotics that will permanently stain your teeth so as to clear me of these ear infections. And then somewhere in my tween years, my mom said, "Well, for you to have teeth that are stained like this is unacceptable. So we're going to go and get you veneers." And they didn't use those words. They said bonding.
Mm-hmm.
And it was plastic veneers that they used. And those, something I don't know if she knew at the time, but those only last for like 5 years, 10 at the most. And that meant that I would have to have them replaced. And that's what ended up happening. And I shelled out for porcelain ones, which should last for like 20 years. But the whole process was so long and drawn out and messed up that I actually thanked my dentist in the acknowledgments of this book because like he was great. He was so good to me. Even though it was awful.
My dentist is one of like at the end of my life, like the top 5 people I thank.
Because
I had it all. I had to have everything.
Yeah. What happened with you?
Because in my earlier days, before I discovered the wonders of SSRI uptake reinhibitors. I had every physical manifestation of stress one could have. I had insomnia, IBS. I ground my teeth, and I ground my teeth to the point that my jaw didn't fit into my skull anymore.
Oh, wow.
And so they had to, I did this thing where it's called losing centric, where my teeth didn't fit together. Mm-hmm. Also known as hell on earth. And so they had to put crowns in the back teeth to rebuild my bite.
Right.
But then when they rebuilt, and then I had this thing that the instant orthodontia, which you talk about, because I had a big overbite. And when they did that, they just redid my front ones and tucked them in, so I didn't look like a mule anymore. And but it was, I mean, there was a day I was in the chair 13 hours. I had crappy Irish teeth, and every time they would prep one, which is grinding it down to a tic tac, like, oh, you know what? You actually need a root canal on this. Like, I think I have 4 teeth in my mouth that haven't had root canals.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
That sucks. I'm sorry.
This is my Tinder profile, by the way. I'm so lucky that I could afford it. Mm-hmm. And have it done. But just as a weird thing, I changed dentists. I had this dentist here in LA. And when I first had it done, my dentist was in Sacramento and I lived in LA. But he was my acting teacher's childhood friend, and he did it at cost. And it actually, I saved money by flying to Sacramento, staying in a hotel, and flying back.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Dentistry's no joke on your wallet. That guy,
Michael Delmont, God bless him.
Well, God bless Michael Delmont, everyone. Yeah. Remember him in your prayers tonight.
True. But the point I was going to say is, I said, like, you don't look like you have fake teeth. You look like you have just nice teeth. But I had a dentist down here who's like, I'm going to give you the perfect smile. And I was like, I don't want a perfect smile, because nothing about my face is perfect. So, it's just, just no one's is. It's your face is imperfect. I want it to look, I don't want it to stand out. I just want to look like I have teeth. And I literally had to change. It was like a 3 on the third argument. I was like, I can't do this. And I changed dentists. And I just don't want him perfect. I want him a little uneven and a little discolored. And I want him to look like, oh, he's got nice teeth.
Yeah. I mean, they offered me, like, this all took place kind of just as the super hyper white teeth trend was coming in. So they offered me these very, very white teeth, like super neon fluorescent white. And I was like, no, give me the yellowest ones you've got. And the yellowest ones you've got are kind of normal looking. And I'm very happy with them. People have said the thing that you said. Yeah.
Yeah. I give you the highest compliment. I didn't know. Which is it's like, you don't, again, movie versus reality. I don't want people saying, God, whoever did your teeth.
His dental assistant at the time, who I think he's gotten rid of, thank God, was this very like kind of Steve Martin in Little Shop of Horrors, except female. Like, she was really awful and scary. And she had bright white veneers on top and bottom. And every time I looked at her, it was more proof of like, no, not like that.
Yeah.
That's not what I want.
And we live in a time where not just teeth, the standard of beauty has surpassed physical ability. Like, the standard of beauty is based on, well, you get lip injections, and it's like the Kardashian look is not physically naturally attainable. Mm-hmm. It requires, you have to look surgically enhanced. Have you seen 28 Weeks Later yet? 28 Years Later yet?
I have not.
I'm not spoiling anything. There's a great scene, it's in a dystopia. And this guy comes from, and he has a photo of his girlfriend on his phone.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks like a typical, like what you would describe today as a hot chick. And he's showing it to this kid who grew up in this dystopian village. And he's like, what's wrong with her face?
Exactly.
And he's
Sorry.
like, he goes, what do you mean? He goes like, why are her lips like that? Because she's beautiful. And the kid goes, no, we have a girl in our village who's allergic to fish, and that happens to her sometimes. But I was like, yes, thank you. It's not just me. This isn't right.
Yes. Yep. I completely agree with that kid and with you. And the thing that I think about it is like, this is a time when feminine beauty standards are like hyper feminine. The last time that happened was in the 50s, which is very repressive, like, moment of not wanting women to have power. And I think we're in that again. I think there's a reason for this, but I also, damn the Kardashians every day.
It's also, I think it's called an extinction burst of hypermasculinity.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole UFC of it all.
Yes.
It's also a response to the Me Too movement. All of these things are predictable, but not good.
Yes, I agree with that.
Here's the example that I always say. The Civil War statues in the South did not go up after the Civil War. They went up after civil rights.
Yeah.
It's a I'm threatened and I'm going to push back.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually this will abate, but it's generational.
Yeah. It's just time if we survive long enough.
Yeah. In 20 years, Trump is dead and whites are a minority, and nothing you do today can affect either one of those things. So yeah, who thought they'd go quietly? Show of hands. But and I said that it's because I said that online. I said that online, and all the comments.
Well, there was your first mistake. You shouldn't say that kind of thing online.
Well, all the comments were like, all of these self-loathing liberals, blah 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 blah, and I was like, no, I'm not self-loathing at all. Believe me, I love myself, but I'm not proud that I'm white because I had nothing to do with it. It's like being proud of having feet. I'm proud of my accomplishments.
Well, I'll tell you something sort of interesting about this conversation. One of the essays that didn't make the cut into this book was an essay about Gone with the Wind and Django Unchained and my family. And I think I'm at a point now where I'm comfortable saying that I was raised in a family that was pretty white supremacist. I mean, we weren't marching in the streets. We didn't say the 14 words, none of that. But it was like, yes, you should only mix with white society. That is the right way. The white way is just a more civilized, reasonable way to live, which is, of course, not what I believe today, but it was what I was raised with. And the essay turned out, I could look back at it after I had written it and realize that it was really an expiation of white guilt, which is not really something that anyone needs to read.
Sure.
Like, it's not, that's not something that should be centered in the conversation about movies or about race or about anything.
Because it's not about us.
Yeah, 100% not about us. Yeah. And so I'm really glad I wrote it. I'm really glad I got that out there. And I'm really glad that I thought and talked about Gone with the Wind the way that I did. But I don't think that essay should see the light of day because all it does is recenter whiteness, and that's not what I want.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, I grew up in a house. I heard the N-word a dozen times a day. And it's just that world. It's gone. It's going away. But it was, 60s, 70s, middle, Archie Bunker. I think that one of the reasons we are where we are today is, and I don't think people appreciate that when Obama got elected, half the country's brains broke. I just don't think people understand the degree to which that really violated people's views of what reality should be in this country. You know, you're talking about the 50s, and you know, we are in an era where, I mean, that's the wink wink behind making America great again, is going back to this period where things were great for wealthy white men. But you talk a lot about the movie The Misfits, which I have to admit, I've never seen it. I know it, obviously, but it is one of those movies where, and there's a lot of these, and I find them really fascinating. It's got all of these ingredients, and it doesn't work. It's got, and the way you describe it, it's got too much good stuff in it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that go wrong with that movie. One of the things that goes wrong is that.
Well, let's introduce the movie for people that don't know, like, who's in it, okay. What's it about?
So The Misfits is a 1961 film directed by John Huston, and it was written by Arthur Miller. It's his only screenplay, and it stars Marilyn Monroe, who was married to Miller at the time, and Clark Gable and Montgomery Clift. And I know a lot of details about all of those stars,
yeah.
But
those are three huge stars.
Yeah, they're very great movie stars.
Time. Yeah.
And Eli Wallach and Thelma Ritter are also in it, who I'm going to say those are two of the greatest character actors who have ever lived.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting setup for a film to have all of these just really big, really talented, really charismatic people in it. But it's a dud. It's a dud of a movie. Part of it is that there's no kind of driving force of plot or character. These people are just kind of stuck in Reno and they just do things. And I think the reason for that is that the screenplay was being rewritten constantly. And as Miller's marriage to Monroe was failing, he wrote her worse and worse and worse. And she's just completely inconsistent throughout the film. Like, who she is and what she is there to do is just changes from scene to scene.
It's almost as if, and you know more than I do, it's almost as if he was too good of a writer to write a movie, because his biggest works are about ideas, and movies about ideas rarely work because movies need to be kinetic.
I would not say that, what you just said. I don't know enough about Miller or know his work well enough to really judge why this one doesn't work. I don't really like his work. And I don't think he was suited to writing a film, because once a play is done, it's done. And it's, you do it the same way every time. And movies aren't like that. They're much more dynamic and constantly shifting.
Right.
And so for him to do that, it's kind of, I don't know, it doesn't make a lot of sense, I think, for the kind of writer that he was. But
yeah, like Death of a Salesman would not make a great movie.
No, it wouldn't. And I don't, yeah, they're very different forms. And for people to think that they are similar because they're both actors saying lines is like, no, it's not the same thing at all.
Well, it's like when these great novelists went to Hollywood to write screenplays. And, it's not necessarily that they're not, just because you're great at one doesn't mean you'll be great at the other. It's fish and fowl.
Mm-hmm. It is. And it seems like it's not with plays and movies, but it totally 100% is. So I think that's part of it. Part of it is that the shoot was total chaos. Monroe was very sick at the time, but she also was kind of publicly getting the blame for wrecking the shoot when John Huston was gambling the production money, like the budget of the film, at the tables in Reno every night, which is just shocking to me. And the fact that kind of never got out in any of the... Anyway. And Clift was his usual self. He's not a reliable human being. And... like, I love Montgomery Clift, but he's not who you call when you need someone to kind of be there.
Yeah, well, this was after he's a fascinating story because he sort of had two careers.
Mm-hmm.
He was he was one of the great famous method actors, very internal and small, not small, you know what I mean? Very internal, very methody. And he was beautiful.
Oh my God.
And then he got into a terrible car accident right down the street from my house. And it kind of effed up his face. And so it was like before the accident and after the accident.
Fun fact, he was happier after the accident because being that beautiful, he felt like a freak. And once he was...
I know how he feels.
And so once he was like a little bit asymmetrical, like a little bit less beautiful, he felt like he could be a better actor.
I believe that.
But it didn't help his pill addiction that he was in a very serious accident that needed... Yeah.
Now, did his pill addiction come from being in pain? Or was he just... he was an actor?
No, I think he was in pain and then eventually was an addict. I think that's what happened.
That happens.
Like, I think, yeah. I think he had problems that required pain pills, but then that just turned into itself.
The book that you talk, is it The Making of the Misfits?
Yeah.
Is that what it's? Yeah, I really got to get that book. These three people are icons at this point. They are larger than life, and they're all so broken. Like Clark Gable, famously, after Carol Lombard
Never
died,
the same again.
Was just a shell of a man. Didn't he kill somebody?
No. So,
I
know
car
exactly
accident?
what you're talking about, but it was actually probably Houston. And it's funny you ask, because the last year I've been researching 1930s Hollywood, and this specifically came up because of the book that I'm writing about that period. And
what's the book? Oh, okay. I want to talk about that.
And someone hit and killed a pedestrian in Hollywood in, like, I think on Sunset, kind of near where UCLA is now.
Yeah.
And they covered it up, but they covered it up in this confusing way where it could have been Gable because they were responding to a prostitute situation for Gable on a similar day. But this was probably Houston. That's at least what the books that I've read have said.
Okay. And from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eddie Mannix basically said, we're going to get a mid-level executive who's on his way out, and he's going to take the rap.
Yep. It is, but it's also like there's this book that I have about Mannix and Strickling and how, everything that they.
What's the book?
It's called, I think, The Fixers.
Yeah, I think I have the book.
The Fixers is like, I think a lot of it is conjecture, or sort of sources, but not really. Gossip. It's not as bad as Hollywood Babylon, but it's not very reliable at all.
Yeah.
But the part where he talks about this particular incident is like, it's unclear what exactly they were covering up, and when, but the files kind of got mixed together for Eddie Mannix. And so who he was actually protecting in that incident is not clear to us now. But yes, a pedestrian was killed. It was probably either Gable or Houston, and someone else took the fall for it. But Clark Gable did, in fact, rape Loretta Young. And the baby that she had, that she, quote, adopted, was Clark Gable's. But the person who knew that it was rape did not reveal that until after the kid's death in, like, the 2010s, I think. So for years and years and years, it was like, okay, first there's this secret that this is Clark Gable's baby. And then there's this secret that, that lasts decades and decades. And then there's this secret that, in fact, it was rape. And that secret has only been revealed for a relatively short time. But yeah.
And it wasn't common. It was ubiquitous. I mean, Eddie Mueller wrote a book called Dark City Dames, which is the story of several actresses that were, famous film noir actresses that weren't the big ones, and it's people like, Colleen Gray, Ann Savage from Detour. And there's this woman, Evelyn Keyes. I mean, her life reads like Angela's ashes in Malibu. Like it's just like this unending abuse and torment. And it's interesting. I was listening to this thing about, John Ford, and, they say that guys have a warped image of masculinity because of movies. But a lot of those movies that they look to were done by these warped people. So it's like chicken or the egg. If John Ford had one session with a therapist, the ending of the session would not be, I don't think you need anything. I think you're good. I don't want to take your money. Because I grew up in the 70s, but I was watching old movies all the time. I had to realize, like, not that I ever did this, but like, to me, I was like, if you go for a woman and she's, if she's a star, just slap her. If she resists your kiss, well, you got to force it. Like I never did those things because in the moment it felt like, oh no, this is right. But that was the standard.
Yeah, I get that. And, as I'm watching all these 30s movies and research, it's interesting. One of the figures in my book is John Gilbert, who was a silent actor who didn't quite make the transition to sound. And he was masculinity in the silent era. He and Rudolph Valentino, who are both very sort of fit, trim men who paid absolute attention to the women on screen, like thought that they hung the moon, very obviously like worshipped these women. And then what changed was Gable. He came in, he's this very masculine, very like sort of meaty dude. And the way that he treats women is sort of, you got to love me, even though I push you around. And that's not great, but it's kind of was the new masculinity at the time. And all of these sort of thin, respectful men went out the window. And as far as I'm concerned, the exact same thing happened in the 80s in action movies. Like you had sort of action movies with people like Steve McQueen, and then now you have action movies with people like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, who are these meaty motherfuckers. Like,
well, not even they're superhero.
Sure,
I mean, you go from. Not even, again, like it's the male version of a Kardashian.
It is, yes,
it's like,
yes.
This body isn't even
it's not achievable, but that is the model of masculinity, as opposed to something that's more, I guess, reasonable, even if it's toxic, like, McQueen hitting Ally McGraw in, I think, not The Getaway, maybe The Getaway, but like, very different vision of masculine perfection between sort of ugly 70s guys, not Steve McQueen, he's not ugly, but like Robert Duvall and Gene Hackman, who are like no one's idea of a beauty queen, to these like ultra steroid dudes. It's just interesting to me how this too is a cycle of like what we consider masculine changes and then rechanges over the decades.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my favorite topics is Sean Connery's body in Diamonds Are Forever. It's
and Zardoz for that matter.
He takes off his shirt and he looks like my dad. It's like, but you could be an action hero and look like a human being. You can't anymore.
Yes.
I don't know if that will, that will change, but it is that whole jacked kind of thing. I remember I had a trainer, and the first day I worked with him, I was like, I can't do this. Like 2 days later, I was immobile, and he was like, "Don't you want to get jacked?" I said, "No, No, I don't. I just want to be healthy and in shape. I don't, but he couldn't even understand that.
Yeah.
Like, don't you want your manifest destiny to be as big as you possibly can? Like, no. It's a weird, I'm not proud of this. I was just salmon fishing.
Were you now?
I was in Alaska because my daughter was in Alaska, like a lot of kids these days. My daughter went into paleontology, and she was up there, literally part of school, on a dig. And then she was like, "Come on up, we'll hang out." So we go up and we hang out. It was great. Alaska's gorgeous. And the sun didn't go down, but we had a great time. My daughter wanted to go salmon fishing, which is not exciting. But she had she caught a bunch of fish. I didn't catch anything, and we had this like aggro salmon fishing guide who's like, "I feel it, Dan. You're gonna get one. I can feel it coming. If you can catch a rock, you can catch a fish." And I finally said, like, I don't define success this way. I'm fine if I don't catch a fish. It's like I'll go home tonight. I'll be okay.
Oh boy.
It was just like, we're gonna win. I don't need to win standing by a river. I'm just here.
Oh boy! Wow.
Yeah. No, it is. It's the chicken or the egg. I mean, it's kind of goes back full circle to what your book Out There in the Dark is about. Is we live in a chicken or the egg sort of cultural loop where film, people look at movies as reality and it affects how they live their lives, but then it goes back to back to film. The last film you talk about somewhat extensively in the book is Mildred Pierce, which you draw an analogy to your own childhood. You say something really interesting in the book. You say, "The first time I remember feeling shame about money was the first grade, and the last time was a few minutes ago." How is it that you felt shame about money in the first grade?
This is a sad story. So, in the first grade, Christmas that year, they had this little like market. To be clear, my memories of childhood are fuzzy at best and very patchy. So I don't know what the purpose of this was or anything like that. But they had this thing where you could go and you could buy gifts for Christmas at school. And my parents gave me $20 to buy something. And this must have been like 1986, I'm going to guess, maybe 1987. So they gave me $20 and I went in and I looked at the market and I bought a stuffed poodle that was $20 for myself. And I came home and my parents were really upset because I had bought a present for myself. The idea was that they would give me money and I would buy presents for other people at this thing. I was not aware that that was the situation. I thought that the money was for me. And also I was maybe 6. So,
yeah.
But they made me feel really ashamed that I thought about myself first instead of thinking about other people when they gave me money. And that was when that happened. And that was like, I'm not going to say that's like the root of the money trauma because it's not at all, but it's like, that was the first time that I was like, okay, so money can make me feel bad.
Yeah, no, I get it. We all have those stories. I mean, we all have those weird stories. So, where do you suggest people get your book? Where's the best place to purchase your book? Okay,
you can purchase it either from my publisher, Autofocus Books, which is autofocusbooks.com, if I'm not mistaken. You can also just Google Autofocus. Yeah. You can get it at Asterism, which is the distributor, Asterism Books.
ASTERISM? ASTORISM?
And you can also get it at Bookshop. if you want, you can buy it directly from me, and I will send you an autographed copy. And I don't have any stickers for this book, but I do have some hand-pressed cards that I made with quotes from the book that I can send along.
Yeah.
And
just like if you wanted to buy the book and not give money to somebody who doesn't need any more money.
I mean, it's actually not available on Amazon. So there's that. But
good.
Yeah, you can get it direct from me. Go to my website, kcoldiron.com, or you can get it from Autofocus, Asterism, or Bookshop.
kcoldiron.com. Good on you. We didn't get to talk about how much I don't like No Time to Die, which is a new subject for us.
Can I plug something else just in case other? So I don't know who listens to your podcast. So this is
bunch of jerks.
The last novel that I finished, actually, I finished it last year, and it was a book inspired by Casablanca, and it's about Ilsa, kind of her life from the time that she's a late teenager up through the events of the film. And I am really proud of it. I worked really, really hard on it. I spent like 2 years researching and writing, and I haven't been able to find anyone who wants to get permission from Warner Brothers to publish this book.
I guess they still have the, even after all this time?
The copyright does belong to Warner Brothers, and I consulted with a lawyer, and like the IP situation is that we need to get permission from Warner Brothers to use the characters. So I haven't had a lot of luck with that, but that's it's a really interesting book, and it's an interesting reflection on the Trump era. Like, this is the book that I wanted to write, was kind of reflecting on 2016 to 2020, but now that we're in another one, it seems even more to the point.
Yeah. I understand that. Oh, great. Well, good luck. I mean, it can be done. And what I have found is it depends on who asks. It's not the ask, it's the asker. Yeah, that's certainly for sure. Well, the book is called Out There in the Dark. Go to kcoldiron.com, or you can get it from the publisher Autofocus. And Katherine will be back. We didn't even get to talk about my better version of Fire Walk With Me idea.
There is no better version of Fire Walk With Me. Fire Walk With Me is a masterpiece.
Okay. Not saying it's not. But is there to have made it more commercially successful and to bridge the gap in what Mark Frost wanted to do with what David wanted to do? Because Mark Frost wanted to bring the story forward. David wanted to tell the story of Laura Palmer. To do a Godfather Part 2, Dale Cooper is in the Black Lodge, and evil Dale Cooper is running amok. And we go back and forth between the last 7 days of Laura Palmer and what's happening with Dale. But then we wouldn't have gotten season 3. So,
and like, I think David was right to be concerned about showing what the audience thinks they want when it's not actually what they want. I mean, one of the greatest lessons about narrative that I ever learned was when he said in his book of interviews, like, people thought they wanted to know who killed Laura Palmer, but once they did, it was over.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and I didn't realize, we've talked about this before and I'll let you go, but like, I appreciated that movie late. I didn't get it for a long time. I mean, and I saw it opening night and I walked out and said, "What did I ever do to you?" But now I will, again, we're done. I'm not going to recover. The Q2 fan edit, I actually like better than his cut.
Good to know.
It's 3 hours and 20 minutes, but I just find that, all of the fan service stuff, the Michael, you see everybody, it takes its foot off your throat a little bit and lets you breathe a little bit before you go back into this story.
Yeah. I don't know. I am hugely impressed by Lynch putting us inside of a dying girl and not letting us not letting us go from that. Like, I think that's a much more impressive achievement than I care about being comfortable, you know?
Yeah, no, that's true. No, I definitely said like, this is the more comfortable version, for sure. Like, absolutely. But I also could stay in Deer Meadow for another hour. I'm a Chet Desmond fan. I'll happily have more Chet Desmond.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould bound. We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I'm I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out. You want me? Peace out. Boom.